I didn't know what she held back, but I had a feeling that it was the flame that turned her into an inferno. Whatever happened to make her this way wouldn't let her go, and now she still burned bright, hated the world for whatever it did to her. I didn't want to fix her, although I would if I could. I only wanted to know her and to understand what motivated her, what made her run away, and what would make her want to stay. I couldn't put any of that into words, though. "I'm not taking on new patients right now," she smiled, only a fraction of an inch. "I bet you're not. And anyway, you couldn't afford me." She snorted and tugged at her hair. "I should get back to work. If Maria comes to you again, tell me. In the meantime, I'm going to do some more digging and see if I can't figure out some more details." "What can I do?" she asked. I was tempted to give her an honest answer. She could take off her clothes and straddle me until we both came in shivering gasps. Instead, I only shook my head. "Don't worry about it for now." She turned to the door and put her hand on the knob, but hesitated. "I don't date doctors, you know." "I don't date nurses." She looked back at me. "What's the point of this, then?" I shook my head. "I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't bother." I stared at her, daring her to agree. She smiled slightly. "Maybe you're right. Get back to work. I'll see you later." She turned and left, shutting the door behind her. I lingered there, then sat down in my chair and leaned back, looking up at the ceiling, my mind whirling so fast I could barely control myself. That kiss, her lips soft and strong and proud, and her taste on my tongue, and goddamn that kiss. But Maria knew. That was a problem. I didn't know how far she'd go to protect her secret, and I suspected it might be very, very far. If she really was wrapped up with the mafia and involved with some dangerous people, then that meant she might use those dangerous people against us. I had to be ready to protect Fiona. That was the most important thing, above all else. Maria could go away. I didn't give a damn, so long as Fiona came through this on the other side. I only wished I understood exactly what I was protecting, if this was something real, whatever was happening between us, or if I was going to do what I always did and run the hell away. I was too scared of turning into my father, and Fiona was scared of something else. 11. Fiona, in the shower that night after getting home from my shift. Again while eating dinner, and again while watching TV. In bed, because I couldn't sleep, and in the morning, when I lay on my side staring at the clock, halfway wishing it weren't my day off. I couldn't stop thinking about that kiss. It had been a while since I reacted that way to a man. Maybe I never had before in my life. I tried to think back to previous boyfriends, but they all seemed like phantom blobs in my memory, vague gray shapes that laughed and grunted and had too much hair. Dean was crystal clear. Too clear, really, so sharp that I could still taste him and feel him on my lips and teeth and tongue. I wished I could make the memory go away, or maybe that I could go back in time and make myself stop, but I couldn't do either. It was probably for the best. I needed to get that out of my system. One kiss was no big deal, after all, and I told him that I don't date doctors. He said he doesn't date nurses, so that's the end of it. We won't date each other. Except I kept thinking about him, and not about the thing I should have been obsessed over. At the bodega down the block while I bought some coffee, in the bagel place while I bought more coffee and a sandwich, and in the grocery store while I pawed at apples and heads of lettuce. I knew I should have been focusing on the Maria problem, and yet I couldn't seem to care about that, like kissing a handsome doctor was somehow more pressing. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Either way, there he stayed, locked up tight in my brain, and apparently not going anywhere. I dropped off my produce, then went for a walk, partly to clear my mind, and partly because I had nothing better to do. It was a nice morning, slightly blustery, but the sun was strong and warm, and I felt good. I stopped for another coffee, my third of the day, and felt the jitters as I sipped it and continued down Philly streets congested with traffic, old cars parked tight against the curb, trash rolling along the gutters, people sitting on their stoops, women leaning out of windows, brick buildings looming all over and seeming to stretch out into forever. I angled toward the park, stopped at a light, and looked back over my shoulder. That was the first time I saw them. Two guys, one of them tall, the other medium height, both of them wearing nondescript windbreakers and jeans. The shorter guy was bald, with chubby cheeks, and the taller one had long hair pulled back into a ponytail and the ghost of a beard. I kept going, not thinking much of it, but by the time I was halfway through my coffee, I saw them again, lingering near a tree while I sat on a bench and watched groups of kids walk past. I watched them, and they seemed to watch me before they moved on. I tried to shake the feeling that they were staring at me still as I moved on toward the shopping mall on Walnut, and decided to duck into a CVS for a bottle of water, only to spot them again across the street as I hurried on. My heart started racing. I shoved my hand in my back pocket and fingered my cell phone, wondering if I should call Dean, or maybe I was being paranoid and stupid. I hurried on and stopped in Paper Source, and when I came out a few minutes later after browsing, I didn't see them at all. Stupid. Very stupid. I was being stupid and paranoid. I let myself drift back into pleasant daydreams of Dean pushing me up against his desk and spanking me raw when I turned a corner and spotted them. I stopped mid-stride and stared. They stood leaning up against a car, seemingly oblivious to me, but when I turned on my heel and marched in the opposite direction, scaring the hell out of some nice old lady and her son, who promptly called me a stupid fucking douchebag, better watch where you're going, I glanced over my shoulder and saw the two guys following me again. I pulled out my phone and dialed. Dean answered on the second ring. "I thought you had the day off," he said. "I'm being followed." He didn't speak for a few seconds. "Who are they?" "I don't know." I hurried down Walnut, back toward the park, heart racing. Two guys. One's tall, the other's short and kind of fat. White guys. Average looking, I guess. "You're sure they're following you?" "Dean, I'm absolutely fucking sure." "Okay, all right, I had to ask." He sucked in a breath. "Where are you right now?" "Walnut, heading west." "Come to Mercy." "What?" "No way. That's where Maria's at. It's also an extremely public place." "Dean, okay, start walking toward Mercy. I'll pick you up." "I'll be on Walnut." He hung up the phone. I cursed, put my phone away, crossed at the next light, and headed back the opposite direction. I saw the guys staring at me across the street, and I realized they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. I walked fast, and I tried not to panic, but it was hard. I wanted to start sprinting, but I knew that would only draw more attention and might make the guys do something drastic. They were mafia. I was so sure of it my lungs hurt, and every step was a painful reminder that I was deep down the rabbit hole now and might not ever see the other side. A car rolled up next to me and pulled over, double parking a black SUV. I almost screamed when Dean rolled down his window. "Get in!" I ran around to the passenger's side, threw open the door, and buckled myself in. He pulled out, and I scanned the crowd of tourists and bored locals, spotting them as we rolled along. They openly stared, and the shorter one lit a cigarette. "You okay?" Dean asked. "I think so." "Where are they?" "Back there, one's smoking." He peered into his rearview mirror and shook his head. "I don't see." Two guys followed me almost all day. I wrapped my arms around myself, staring ahead. "What the hell am I going to do?" "Nothing," he said. "You don't need to do anything." "You're not the one they followed," I snapped, and even as soon as I said it, I knew it wasn't helpful. He wasn't the bad guy here, but it didn't seem to ruffle him. They would have done something if they were going to do anything at all. I bet they're only trying to intimidate you. It worked? Did they try to hide? I hesitated. A little bit, but not really. I mean, you saw them. I bet those guys could have tailed you all day without you realizing. I felt my stomach churn. Oh my God, they could have been following me for weeks. Maybe, but I doubt it. He tapped the steering wheel with his fingers, drumming them in a broken rhythm. I think they're trying to scare you. Maria said something about turning on me, right? She mentioned that, yeah. I bet that's the angle then. They want you to turn on me and help them out. I bet Maria approaches you again soon and pushes that hard. I chewed my lip. I won't do it. He laughed. Thanks. Seriously. I'm not playing their game. I hope not. But this doesn't change anything. Even if they're trying to scare me, it freaking worked. He grunted and rolled the car along, heading south until he found a spot. He pulled over, but left the engine running and turned to face me, concern etched into his expression. You can come stay with me. I gaped at him. Are you serious? I'm serious. We can go to work together. I'll keep an eye on you. What the hell are you going to do if some mafia guys want to come hurt me? He smiled a little and tilted his head. I'm not as useless as you think. That's not what I meant. I know. He nodded to himself. It's a good plan. We can stick together until this is all over. No way, I said, shaking my head. Absolutely no way. Why not? I have a spare room. You'll have your own bathroom. We'll be like roommates. I didn't know how to explain how bad of an idea that was. I spent all last night and all this morning daydreaming about him, thinking about his kiss, about his hands on my skin, on my body, and now he wanted me to move in with him. It would be a mess, such a damn mess, because I knew that as soon as we were alone in the same room, I'd do something stupid. And I couldn't handle that, not right now, not when he wanted something I could never, ever give him. I just can't. I stared at the dashboard, unable to meet his gaze. He said nothing for a moment, then reached out and put a hand on my thigh. I bit my cheek and looked up at him, staring into his eyes, but I didn't move his hand away. I liked the weight of it, the feel of him, the way he touched me. It made me feel safe in some crazy way. How about this? He said softly. I'll drive you to work from now on. Our schedules don't match up that perfectly, do they? I have some leeway. I'll move things around the best I can, and when I can't, I'll come anyway. Dean, do this for me. I'm going to worry if you won't at least let me try to give you a damn ride. I let out a breath and nodded once. I figured getting a ride to and from work wouldn't be so bad, and anyway, it would make me feel better. Fine, okay? You can drive me to work. It's a date, then. He pulled his hand away and put the car in gear. Not a date, just a ride. My favorite. Or your favorite. Probably your favorite. I rolled my eyes as he pulled out and took me home. I climbed up my stoop and looked back at him as he watched me head into my apartment, and I wanted to call out to him, to invite him into my place, to tell him to come up and keep me company, but that was exactly what I wanted to try to avoid. I waved once, then shut and locked the door behind me, practically jogging into my place and barring and locking all my doors and windows. The apartment felt so empty and almost oppressive, and I knew those guys were out there, waiting for me. But so was Dean, and that helped. 12 Dean, Fiona was quiet on the ride into work the next morning. Her shift started a few hours before mine, so I figured I'd drop her off, then grab a few case files to peruse at home before my shift started in earnest. She smiled at me and squeezed my hand before we stepped out of the car, then disappeared inside without looking back. I let her go. I figured we didn't need the gossip, although that was starting up already. You can't do anything at Mercy without someone noticing and commenting sooner or later. I went up to my office on autopilot, nodding to a few colleagues as I went, thinking about the mafia, thinking about Maria, about her threatening Fiona, about everything bad happening all at once, and stopped dead in my tracks as I opened my door and found the place a wreck. The desk was shoved to the side. Its drawers were ripped open, and papers, charts, and folders were thrown around. My computer was smashed to pieces, my filing cabinet dented and destroyed. It was completely wrecked, everything ripped to shreds, all my notes, all my papers, my case files, my everything, destroyed. "Fuck," I said, not moving, not able to bring myself to move. This was bad. Not because they'd come for me, I expected them to come at me sooner or later, but because destroying my files like this meant a patient might get hurt. I had active cases in there, years and years of patient care, and my notes were incredibly important to those people, and now it looked as though some of it was going to be lost forever. Surprise turned to rage. Maria knew better. She knew what doctors did and how important our jobs were. She knew that ripping a doctor's office into pieces meant hurting the lives of countless patients. The violation was one thing. Having my office broken into didn't feel great, of course, but the loss of my notes and the way that might affect a patient, that was too much to bear. I wanted to kill her. More than anything, I wanted to kick her in the face again and again until she died, but that wouldn't bring back my notes. I took several deep breaths and pulled back on my anger, barely keeping myself under control, and tried to look at this from a distance. Maria knew what she was doing. She knew ripping my place apart like this would hurt patients, but she clearly didn't give a fuck. She must know that I would, and it hit me that she was trying to use my patients against me, using the threat of hurting them to make me back down and give in. That almost sent me spiraling into another rage, but I managed to hold myself back as my fingers clutched at my doorframe. I thought I was dealing with a bureaucrat and a snake, but I was dealing with something so much more than that. She was a psychopath, and she must be willing to do almost anything to keep her secret hidden, which meant her threat level jumped up several notches. I was going to have to convince Fiona to stay with me for a while, and we were going to have to move a lot faster than I thought. My footsteps were silent on the thin industrial carpet as I stalked away. I slammed the door, and it didn't matter anymore. That place was useless to me. I'd come back later and salvage what I could, and from now on I'd keep all my important files locked away at my apartment. As I reached the elevator, I had an idea. I took out my phone and texted an old friend of mine, someone I hadn't spoken to for a little while, but might be able to help. He answered right away and agreed to meet with me for lunch. I hurried back home and prepared to present my case. Kurt Wells grinned at me as we shook hands in the Panera lobby. "Sorry to drag you here, buddy, but I've only got a half hour before I need to be back in court." He looked good, haggard and tired, but good. He was a few inches shorter than me, with a scrubby beard and dark eyes. His suit fit him well enough, but it looked rumpled, like he'd slept in it. "How's the prosecutor's office treating you?" He shrugged as he steered me over to a booth. He already had food arrayed out in front of him, and I guessed he'd been there for a few minutes already based on how much he'd eaten. "Not too bad. You want to grab some food?" "I'm good." I sat down and he shrugged, taking his seat with a sigh. "I gotta say, I was surprised to see you text." "I know, it's been too long." "Yeah, but that's not all your fault. I mean, shit, they have me working 80 hours a week, and I bet you're not much better. I sleep in the hospital most nights." He nodded, like that wasn't a big surprise. "It's the job. I love it, but goddamn, does it take a lot out of me." I can relate. I took my laptop out of my backpack and placed it down on the table. Honestly, my job's great. I love my patients. I love what I do. But sometimes that hospital feels like a vampire sucking away everything I love. Kurt laughed. "Sound like you haven't changed." I grinned at him and turned on the computer. "Okay, speaking of vampires, I need to talk to you about something." I figured this wasn't a social call. "Sorry about that." He waved me away. "Don't worry about it. What do you have for me?" I pulled up the spreadsheet I stole from Maria's office and took a deep breath. I had no clue if he'd believe me or not, and as I told him the story, starting from the moment I overheard Maria and those guys, and ending with finding my office ripped to shreds, I could almost hear myself from his perspective. I sounded crazy, without a doubt, and most people might stand up and walk away thinking I'd had some kind of mental break. But Kurt and I went way back. We were friends in high school and became close in college and kept in touch when I was in med school and he went to law school. We drifted apart after that when we both fell into demanding careers, but we'd always been close and always would be. He understood me better than most, and as I finished talking and showed him the spreadsheet, I knew he'd listen before he wrote me off as insane. "That's one hell of a story," he said, squinting at the numbers on my screen. "And this is all the hard proof you have?" I nodded and told him about the donations. "I think this is a record of her washing money for the mob." He grunted and shook his head. "I'm not sure what to think here." "You see how the numbers don't add up, right?" "What I see is a lot of conjecture and guesswork," he said. "You might be right, but there's no proof here. But my office, do you have pictures?" I hesitated. "No, I don't, but I can get them." "Document everything. From now on, have a recorder with you in your damn pocket wherever you go, just in case that Lady Maria shows up. Tell your friend Fiona to do the same. You need something solid if you're going to go after her." "What about the mafia?" He leaned back in his seat and stared at me. "You know, most people would roll their eyes at you and laugh. You sound nuts talking about the mafia." "I know, Kurt, but, he said, interrupting me, "I'm a prosecutor in this damn shit stain of a city, and I know full well that the mafia is real, and they're very active." I stared at him, a little surprised. "I thought you went after corrupt businessmen or something." He shook his head slowly. "That was a few years ago. I moved on to a new task force, one that's been quietly picking off some of the nastiest made men in this place, and I'm telling you, there's a group called the Leone family that has their claws in just about everything in this town." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "If they're the ones you're dealing with, you'd better be careful." I clenched my jaw for a moment. There was a surprising hint of fear in Kurt's eyes, and it sent a chill down my spine. I'd never seen him afraid of anything, not in all the time I'd known him, not when we got into fights as teenagers, or when we did reckless things as young adults. He never once hesitated, but he was hesitating now, and I knew he was terrified, which meant I was on to something real, and I should be very, very nervous. "I need advice on what to do here," I said. "I'm afraid I'm out of my depth. My advice is to either drop it all together and let them do whatever the hell they're doing, or you'd better get some real advice. Take it to the cops as soon as you can and hope you don't end up dead." "Come on, that wouldn't—" "They would. That's what you have to understand. I know you think you're immune to all this because you're a relatively prominent doctor, but they don't give a damn about that. They own this town." "Do they own you too?" He shook his head, eyes flashing. "I'm one of the few they don't." "Then you can help me. Only if you get me proof first, but listen to what I'm saying. Back down, ignore it, forget you ever heard a damn thing, because these guys don't mess around." "I'll think about that." "Good." He sighed and looked down at his lunch, gone cold. "Lost my damn appetite. Sorry about that. Don't be. Not your fault this city is a mess. Never thought you'd get sucked into it, but I guess there's nowhere to hide from those bastards. I'll let you finish your lunch in peace." He grunted and gave me a strange look as I packed up. "Keep me updated," he said. "Seriously, if you find anything at all, send it to me. I'll do what I can to help." "I really appreciate that." "Good luck, Dean. And, hey, when this is over, let's get a beer." He nodded, and a smile drifted across his face. "Yeah, I'd like that." I shook his hand again, then left, not feeling like I'd gotten anywhere at all, but at least my worst fears had been confirmed. The mafia was real, and Kurt seemed to think it wasn't so far-fetched that they'd be involved with the hospital in some capacity, which meant they were the ones that broke into my office, and they were following Fiona around, and they were going to come after us, one way or another. I'd be ready. damn them to hell, I wasn't going to step aside and let them run their schemes. Maria would pay for what she did to my notes, and to my patience by extension, and the mafia would drown in their own damn blood. 13. Fiona. We fell into an easy rhythm. I'd text Dean at night with my schedule, and he'd show up in the morning, or late in the afternoon, or whenever I needed him. No questions asked, no hesitation. After a couple days, I felt kind of stupid for taking him up on the rides, but he never once suggested we stop. I woke up for an early shift after a few days of our little arrangement. I was tempted to skip the ride today and head into work myself, but I figured it couldn't hurt, and besides, I'd started to really enjoy our rides together. Aside from the first one, we talked the whole time about what was going on with patients and at work, but also about our lives, about our hobbies and favorite shows and movies, and I started to realize that he was actually funny and caring and smart, and not at all the arrogant, cocky asshole I'd always thought he was. Well, he was that too, but not only that, at least. I headed downstairs, dressed and ready, and made some coffee. On the kitchen table was a small black recording device that Dean had given me. He told me about his conversation with his lawyer friend, and how I should have one with me at all times. I picked up the recorder and dropped it into my pocket, absently toying with it, smiling a little, then returned back to the kitchen. As I leaned against the counter and watched the pot fill up slowly, I closed my eyes and thought about what it would be like if I took him up on his offer to stay at his place. There'd be so much tension, and I wasn't sure how long I'd last before I ended up in his bedroom, my body sweating under his hands, his lips against mine, breaking all my rules and making a horrible mistake. And I felt a thrill of excitement. I thought of that kiss and the way I needed more, and I realized that I'd been daydreaming about having more with him ever since we'd first met. That wasn't like me. I kept guys at a distance because I didn't want to get attached, and I didn't want anyone to get attached to me. I wasn't ready for that kind of relationship, and doubted I ever would be. But for some reason with Dean, it was like none of that mattered, and I kept sinking deeper and deeper into him, letting myself feel giddy excitement when his car pulled up outside, or pure joy when he opened the car door for me and made some stupid joke about being my driver. A loud banging at my door made me jump. I glanced at the clock on the stove and frowned. If that was Dean, he was 20 minutes early, which would be unusual. He was always prompt, or maybe a couple minutes late, but never early, especially not this early. I drifted to the door, wondering if maybe he wanted to spend some extra time with me, maybe wanted to take me out to breakfast, and opened the door without thinking. 2 men stood in my threshold, and I choked back a scream. It was them, the 2 men that followed me. One was tall and thin, wiry with dirty hair and dark eyes, while the other was short and compact, with a bald head and a pug-like nose. Both wore simple gray windbreakers and jeans, so boring and nondescript that I would have forgotten them the instant they left my sight, which was probably the point. The bald one stepped forward, and a hand shot out, banging against the door again, holding it open so I couldn't slam it shut in his face. "Hello, Fiona," he said, sounding almost casual. "My name's Aldo, and this is my associate Davide. Mind if we have a chat?" "I don't know you," I blurted out. He grinned at me. "Oh, come on, Fiona. No need to be like that. Let us inside and we'll talk. We're not here to hurt you. Not today, anyway." I took sharp, fast breaths and went through my options. I could scream, but that might provoke them, and I didn't know how violent they'd get. I could try and run, but they were blocking my only exit, and I doubted I could get out a window fast enough, or I could let them in and see what they wanted. My heart raced so fast I felt dizzy as I stepped away from the door. Aldo beamed at me and walked inside, followed by Davide, who gave me a strange, almost bored look as he closed the door behind them. "Nice place," Aldo said, looking around. "You live alone? No roommate's gonna come out and surprise us?" "No," I said. "I'm alone." "Great." He showed me his teeth. It was probably meant to be a smile. "Let's talk, okay?" Sure, we can talk." He drifted toward the table, and I had a sudden, wild idea. "Do you want some coffee?" He frowned at me, then glanced toward the kitchen at the fresh pot. "You know what? I'd love some coffee. You want coffee, Davide?" "No, thank you." Davide's voice was gruff and soft, close to a whisper. "One coffee." I walked into the kitchen, breathing fast, and as I passed in front of the counter, I slipped my hand into my scrubs and found the small, rectangular recording device and hit the record button, or at least what I hoped was the record button. I hadn't practiced this, and I wasn't very familiar with it, so I might have screwed up, but I had to hope. "How do you take it?" "Black," he said. "Please." I filled 2 mugs, one for him and one for me. I added milk to mine and brought them out to the table. He frowned at it, but took a sip and smiled. "What can I do for you two?" I asked, sipping my own coffee, hoping it would steady my hand. Instead, it only made the shaking more obvious. He sat down, and I sat across from him. "We got a problem," Aldo said as he sat. Davide lingered a few feet behind him, hands in the pockets of his windbreaker, eyes narrowed in a strange glare. "I know you've been a very busy girl, very busy, doing things outside of your specific job description." "I'm not sure what you mean," I said, shifting in my chair. "Oh, come on, Fiona. Can we skip that whole stupid game where you pretend like you have no clue what I'm talking about and I don't have to beat the shit out of you until you admit it?" I stared and nodded once. "Good," he said with a sigh. "All right then. So, you've been busy." "Yes. Maria says you've been snooping. She says you might have found something. Did you find something?" "I don't think so." "You don't think so?" He arched an eyebrow. "Come on now, Fiona. What did you find?" "Financial reports, some spreadsheets, but we don't understand any of it." I tried to tell him as much of the truth as I could, skating right along that fine line. He grunted once, nodding slightly. "And what does your boy think?" "Dr. Dean?" "He's as confused as I am, but we're both pretty sure Maria's financially involved with you people." Aldo's eyebrows went up. "Now who do you think we are?" I hesitated. "Mafia." I felt silly saying it out loud. He didn't smile. "Okay, I guess you figured that one out pretty fast." My blood went cold. "What do you want from me?" I think that much is obvious. He leaned closer. "I want you to stop snooping. Leave Maria alone. Stop getting involved in things that don't concern you." "She's stealing from patients. People might die because—" "Nobody's dying," Aldo said, rolling his eyes. "Look, will it make you feel better if I said that any money we touch is money that never would have seen a patient to begin with?" I shrugged. "I guess so." "Then take it from me. We're not stealing shit from nobody." "That's good then," he snorted. "You don't sound convinced." I felt my temper rise and my stupid mouth got the better of me. "You stalk me on the street, you come into my apartment uninvited, and you expect me to do what, believe you? Take your word for it? Sorry if that's not going to happen." Aldo grinned huge and looked over his shoulder at Davide. "Can you believe the balls on this one?" "Huge balls," Davide said. "Enormous. Just enormous elephant balls." Aldo looked back at me. "All right, I hear what you're saying, Fiona. Here's the thing, though. I don't give a fuck what you think. I don't give a fuck that you're annoyed we've been giving you a hard time. I want you to back the fuck off. And if you don't, I'm going to hurt you. Me, personally. I'm going to hurt you very badly." I swallowed once and stared at him. "Get out of my apartment." He shrugged and stood. We said what we came to say. He nodded down at the table. "Thanks for the coffee." I stayed where I was, hand trembling as I tried to pick up my mug. Coffee dribbled down the side and I cursed, putting it back down. Davide looked over his shoulder at me, eyes almost glazed over, and he gave me a wicked smile. I stared back at him, heart racing. Aldo opened the door and stepped out, then stopped. "Who the fuck are you?" I jumped to my feet. That was Dean's voice in the hall. "Well, well," Aldo said as I hurried over. "Looks like Dr. Dean's here." I said, "Who the fuck are you?" I stepped into the hallway, just behind Aldo and Davide. Dean stood near the front door, hands balled into fists, eyes hard. He looked like he was ready to spring to action. "Dean," I said, holding up my hands. "It's okay." He stared into my eyes, then back at Aldo. "I'll ask one more time. Who are you?" "I'm a friend, for now," Aldo said. "I'd listen to your girl there, pal." "Let them go, Dean." He stood there in the doorway, his body outlined and silhouetted by the light from outside, the sounds of the street spilling into the cramped hallway. The walls were bare and white, scuffed by time and neglect, and the two mobsters looked like they were ready to do something violent. Dean finally stepped aside. Aldo went first, grinning madly, followed by David, who said nothing and gave no indication that he cared much about what had happened. Dean lingered, staring at them as they left, then turned to me. I ran to him before he could speak and threw myself into his arms. He hugged me tight. I let out one horrible sob as the fear of the moment unclenched itself from my chest and let my emotions come washing out. I felt foolish and horrible and alone, but also like I'd survived something I shouldn't have. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm fine." They wanted to talk. He tugged me back into my apartment and got me tissues. I wiped my face and nose, laughing a little. "I must look crazy." "Not at all." He glanced at the two mugs on the table. "What did they want?" "Threatened me. Told me to stop getting involved." He nodded, eyes hard. "They won't stop." "I know." I reached into my pocket and looked at the recording device and felt my heart leap when I realized it was still running. I hit the stop button as Dean came over to me and stared at the little black rectangle as I hit play. The conversation began to spill out. "You recorded it all?" he asked, sounding breathless. "I did what you asked." He laughed, like he couldn't help himself, and pulled me into his arms again. I stopped the recorder because I couldn't handle hearing all that over again, not so soon after it happened. He hugged me and slipped the device from my hands, then dropped it into his pocket. "You did good," he said, kissing my hair. "You did really good." I tilted my chin toward him, then stood up on my toes and kissed him. He didn't hesitate. He kissed me back with a fury, wrapping me tight, holding me hard against his muscular body. I felt a thrill roll through me in heavy waves, like I might be pulled under, flipped over and over beneath the waves, and I wanted it badly. The kiss broke off slowly, and my lips lingered close to his. "We should get to work." "Yeah, we should." Neither of us moved until I slipped myself from his arms. The world felt like it was dropping back into focus, and all the reasons that kept me from him to start with were still there, waiting at the margins of my mind like mosquitoes. "Come on," I said. "Wouldn't want to give Maria any reason to fire us." He smiled a little, looking at me with worry in his expression, but led the way out to the street and into his car. 14 Dean, I held it together until we reached the hospital. Her kiss had been desperate and terrified, and it angered me all the more that she'd been driven into fear by those bastards, those animals. I made sure she reached her floor safely and smiled to her, showing her that everything was okay, then hit the button for the administrative floor. I stalked out into the quiet cubicles like a general going into battle. Maria's secretary looked up as I approached, an old, scaly creature with sharp eyes like a lizard. "She's in a meeting," the secretary said. "Tell her I'm here." I loomed above her, standing straight, not bothering to hide my anger. "Tell her it's urgent." The secretary hesitated, then turned toward the door and knocked softly. Maria called out, and the secretary ducked her head inside. They had a short, whispered conversation before the secretary waved me over with an annoyed look. She silently gestured me to the door, then returned to her chair. I stepped into the now familiar office. Maria sat behind her desk and held a finger up as she cradled the phone between her ear and her shoulder. "Yes," she said. "Yes, of course, of course. Listen, Trevor, I'll have to call you back. Someone just came in. Yes, okay." She hung up, then tilted her head and steepled her fingers with a pleasant smile. "Dr. Corse, what can I do for you?" I shut her office door to keep the conversation from reaching her lizard secretary's ears. "Your friends paid Fiona a visit this morning." Her smile didn't falter. "Who do you mean?" "You know who." I didn't sit. I wanted to pace, to storm across the small space, to rip it to shreds and to scream in her face. But this was a political situation. I had to be under control, or else I'd give her more ammunition to use against me. "I'm sorry, I'm afraid I don't. I know you're working with the Leone family." I threw the name out there as a sort of test. She flinched, ever so slightly, her smile faltering. "Who?" I grunted, my hunch confirmed. "Two of their thugs showed up at Fiona's place this morning. They threatened her." "I don't know what you mean." I considered taking out the recording device and showing it to her, but I knew that would force her hand. If she was aware that Fiona had taped that conversation, then Maria and the thugs would be forced to act as fast as they could. They'd turn to violence like they always did, and I wasn't sure I could stop an entire crime family backed by the power of the hospital. "Stop playing games, and don't threaten Fiona again." She spread her hands. "If anyone here is playing games, it's you, Dr. Corse. You're the one breaking into offices. You're the one digging." My office was ransacked, although I'm sure you won't admit to having any knowledge of that. "If someone broke into your office, you should report it to security." I rolled my eyes. "You should know that some of my patient files were destroyed. Some of my notes are missing. That could cost someone." "We have electronic backups." "Not for my notes, we don't." I clenched my jaw. "Tell your thugs to leave Fiona out of this." "I have no control over these thugs, whoever they may be. And if you were smart, Dr. Corse, you might counsel Fiona to listen to those men. Maybe it would be better for everyone if the two of you went back to business as usual. You do have important jobs, after all." I stood staring at her, heart beating heavy in my chest, each pounding thump nearly pushing me toward desperate acts. Instead, I turned away. "You've made your threats, so I'll make mine. Leave Fiona out of this." "Or else what? You have nothing to threaten me with, Dr. Corse." "I'll make sure you burn for this, one way or the other. I suspect if you weren't worried about that, you wouldn't be bothering with all this." I walked to her door and pulled it open. She said nothing as I left, stalking back toward the elevators. I felt her secretary stare into my back as I went. I nearly trembled with rage as I rode back down a floor. I stopped at the lounge to grab some coffee, then walked out onto the floor, forcing a smile on my face, nodding at the nurses who lounged behind their stations, looking half bored, half excited, the way hospitals always were on the verge of something happening. It was never quiet, not exactly. There was silence, or at least there was silence punctuated by bleeping machines and the soft drone of human voices. But quiet suggests a lack of action. Even in the middle of the night, the hospital was never still. I caught Fiona coming out of a patient's room, and she nearly startled as I approached. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded, accepting the cup of coffee I offered. "Just on edge." "Busy right now?" "Not really." She chewed her lip and looked back toward the station. Mary sat behind the desk, gazing in our direction, and I could only imagine the sort of gossip she was brewing. "I talked to Maria." She froze up, eyes darting side to side. "What happened?" She denied everything, of course, but threatened me at the same time. She's a serpent, that one. Fiona nodded and fidgeted with the coffee cup, the white waxed cardboard, the same color as her skin. "Did you record it?" I nodded and took the small recorder from my pocket. "She didn't give up much, though, but of course." "Good." She sucked in a breath. "I don't know what to do. I keep thinking about those guys just showing up like that." "You can come stay with me." She looked away and shook her head. "No, thanks. I'll get a dog instead." I laughed. "You can't take care of a dog. You work too much." Then a gun. "Not a terrible idea, although you'll probably shoot yourself by accident. Might as well get a dog." She gave me a look. "What should I do then?" "Get better locks on your door and keep your head down. Or come stay with me." She opened her mouth to say something, but Mary suddenly stood and came barreling toward us. "She's crashing," she said, storming into the room Fiona just walked out of. Fiona gave me a wild look, then her face seemed to shift into something solid and stone-like. She followed Mary into the room, and I ran in on her heels, dropping into doctor mode, our previous conversation completely forgotten. That was how it went at Mercy. One second we were talking about the mafia breaking into her house, and the next we were saving a patient. The girl on the bed was young, mid-20s at most. She was having a seizure, and Mary and Fiona worked to get her stabilized as I skimmed her chart, then stepped in to help. We got her physically under control, making sure she couldn't hurt herself. Then I got an anti-seizure medication and added it into her IV. The drug took a few minutes to work, but soon she calmed down, and Mary stepped away from the bed with a sigh. The girl was pretty, brown hair, round blue eyes, and she groaned softly, making strange sucking, grunting noises as Fiona touched her shoulder and spoke to her in a low whisper. I stepped out of the room and stretched my back. "Lucky you were there, Doctor," Mary said, giving me a look. "What's going on with you and Fiona, anyway?" I smiled at her. "Nothing at all," I said. "Really? Strange, since I see the two of you whispering together in hallways. It's almost as if you've never seen two colleagues speak to each other before." Mary snorted as she walked back toward the desk. "You act like doctors treat nurses as equals." I sighed and turned away. I didn't need to get into that argument. I knew I'd lose, some way or another, and it'd only lead to Mary getting pissed, and more rumors on top of it. Doctors and nurses were always somehow at odds, and I never quite understood why. We both did important jobs and had our own roles. Society placed more emphasis on doctors, but nurses saved as many lives, if not more. I had nothing but the utmost respect for what the nurses did day in and day out, doing the hard work of keeping bodies alive, being there even when times were rough. But it wasn't worth having a conversation about it. I wandered back toward the elevators and lingered there, waiting for Fiona to come back out of that room. But she never did. I imagined her standing at the girl's bedside, speaking to her softly, and I realized I didn't even know the patient's name. That was the difference between doctors and nurses right there. I was willing to bet Fiona knew that girl's name and her story, and a host of other details about her. Patients tended to be collections of descriptive factors and symptoms on a chart for doctors, but they were always people, flesh and blood, for the nursing staff. I left that floor and headed back to my still half-ruined office. 15, Fiona. The day felt like it dragged on, and the only thing that kept me going was constant coffee and Mary's insistent nagging. "I know you two have got something going," she said, leaning back in her chair. "Come on, Fiona, spill it. He all but admitted it earlier." "No, he didn't, because there's nothing to say." I sighed and closed my eyes, rubbing them with my heels of my hands. "You're obsessed. I need the truth." She pounded her hands on the desk. "The truth, damn you!" "You can't handle the truth." I grinned at her. She laughed and stretched her arms. "I get it. You don't want to talk about him, and I don't blame you, but I've got to admit, Dean's one of the decent doctors." I snorted. "That's not what you said before." She waved me off. "Sure he is. I like him anyway." "What changed your mind? You really want to know?" "Of course. It's the way he looks at you." I laughed a little like she was joking, but stopped when I realized that she was very serious. "What's that supposed to mean?" "He doesn't look at me like anything." Someone sounds defensive. "I'm just saying. He looks at you like you're some kind of prize. It's hard to explain. It's like he can't help himself." I frowned a little, looking away and down toward Morgan's room, the young girl with epilepsy. I thought of him coming in and helping, no questions asked, no hesitation, and I knew most doctors would do the same thing, and yet a lot of them would linger and get involved and try to start prescribing everything under the sun. He didn't. He left when the crisis was over, when he realized I didn't need his help. "I haven't noticed," I said. "Come on, you have to have noticed." She grunted and stood up. "Think about it then, you know it's true. He's a good one. You should go out with him." I shot her a glare. "I don't date doctors. You know that's a bad idea." Sure, but you should anyway." "Why, so you can tell everyone?" She barked a laugh. "Sure, that. And I think you'd get along with him. I'm not always thinking about number one, you know." "Hard to believe," I muttered. She laughed again and waved a hand as she went off to check on a patient. I thought about that for the rest of my shift. I kept thinking about the time we'd spent together, trying to imagine the way he looked at me, and couldn't see what she meant. I was probably too close to it, though, unable to see the truth of what was happening right in front of me. A couple hours later, he showed up right on time, like always, and waited for me to get my stuff. He smiled as I fell into step next to him in the hall, our shoes making a soft thump on the linoleum, and the sounds of beeping, of voices followed me along. I smelled antiseptic and saline drip, and the walls were a soft teal, dull and smudged with dirt and grime from years of abuse and neglect. In the elevator, he leaned toward me. "I don't think your friend Mary likes me very much." "You'd be surprised, actually." He laughed. "Really? She wanted to get into it about doctors versus nurses. That's her favorite topic. She can go on and on about arrogant doctors all day long. I assume I fit into that category." I shrugged a little, smiling up at him innocently, batting my eyelashes. "No, of course not. You're perfect." He sighed and looked away, smiling, shaking his head. "Damn nurses, you're all the same." "Of course we are, since we're all disposable minions to you doctors." "I'm not doing this with you." I grinned and leaned up against him, feeling my heart thud fast lumps in my chest. We got off the elevator together, and for the first time in a while, I wasn't thinking about what people might think. Normally, when we walked together, I kept picturing the dirty looks, the sideways glances, the assumptions, and the future gossip boiling up around us like dying weeds. But today I didn't care about any of that. Didn't care if people thought we had a thing, because we did, and damn them all, they had no clue what it meant. Mary could gossip all she liked, but she had no clue what we were doing, not even the slightest idea. Dean drove us slowly back through the city. I stared out the window, thinking about those mafia guys, their dirty looks, their slicked-back hair, their boring windbreakers. I saw a bright red Virginia creeper slithering up the fence of a parking lot, and ragweed breaking up through the cracks in the pavement, and it was startling how nature managed to intrude into the city where people worked so hard to keep it away. "I don't want to go back to my apartment," I said softly, watching people march down the block in suits and backpacks and dark slacks. "You can come back to mine. I don't want to do that either. We're running out of options then. Drive me somewhere far, far from here." He laughed. "Should we run away?" "We can live in Bali. What do you think of that?" "Bali sounds nice to me. I'll quit being a doctor." "They need doctors in Bali, I bet." Good point. I looked at him and smiled, shaking my head. No, we can't do that. No, we can't, he said softly, almost wistful. She'd win then. And I don't want her to win. I don't either. I leaned my head back. Come have a drink with me. Where? I know a bar. My place. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Okay. I smiled a little and looked away. I knew what it meant, asking him in for a drink, but I didn't care. The thought of going into that apartment alone scared the hell out of me, and I wanted to run away screaming. But I thought it might be easier to get used to the idea of staying there again if he came in with me for my first time back in there since those two bastards intruded into my life. He parked, and I led the way. The house seemed quiet and empty and foreboding, the shadows cast by the beat-up trim somehow deeper and darker, and when I pushed open my door, I half expected a man in a nondescript windbreaker to leap out of the dark with a knife. But of course that didn't happen. The place was quiet and empty. Dean shut the door and locked it. If you want, I can cook you dinner. I don't have much in the house. That's okay. He walked into the kitchen and took a bottle of white wine from the refrigerator. How's this? That's good. I drifted toward my room. Mind if I get changed? Not at all. I heard him uncork the wine as I shut my door behind me. I leaned up against it, staring at the far wall, trying to decide what I was doing. We were having a drink after work, alone in my apartment. The implications were so obvious, but I didn't want them to be. I wanted safety, and for some reason, Dean made me feel safe. I changed into yoga pants and a sweatshirt. I figured that would send the right message. I pulled my hair up into an absurd bun on the top of my head and let the stray strands roll down the back of my neck. When I stepped back out into the kitchen, the smell of frying garlic made my mouth water. He looked up from the stove and paused, a smile on his lips, and I saw that look then, the look Mary mentioned, his eyes drifting down from my lips to my knees and back up again, and the pleasure in his expression like he was staring at a work of art. I felt a shiver on my spine and wanted him to keep looking, wanted his gaze to hold me there pinned in his imagination, because I was sure that whatever image of me he had was better than the real thing. I touched my abdomen, where the scar jutted over my skin, ugly and thick, like a braided rope. I made a face and hoped he didn't notice as my fingers traced its length. I'm doing pasta, he said, since that's just about the only thing you have. Told you. I poured myself some wine and took a long sip. I'm surprised you can cook. Every man needs to know how to cook, I snorted. There are a lot of people that don't agree with you. He brandished his wooden spoon at me. And there are a lot of wrong people in this world. Cooking is one of the most important things in this life, so what's the point of living if you can't make good food? I laughed and shook my head. I guess you're right. Damn right I am. Can I ask you something? He glanced back at me. At this point, I think you can ask me pretty much whatever you want. How come you never date nurses? I sipped my wine and watched his reaction. He tensed, which wasn't what I expected. He didn't look back at me as he dropped some chopped onion on top of the garlic and stirred. I don't like to get involved at work, he said. That's everyone's excuse, but nobody actually follows that rule. I don't trust myself. I hesitated. What do you mean? He took a deep breath and looked back at me. I saw the wariness in his eyes. My father was a difficult man, military man, moved us around a lot. I didn't learn much about having a stable, normal relationship from my parents, and I guess I sort of just accepted that I never would. You mentioned your father before. Are you close? No, he said. We weren't, and he passed away. I'm sorry. I'm not. He looked away again. He was a bastard. You said he was disappointed that you didn't join the military. Can you imagine? Disappointed that I wanted to become a doctor? He shook his head. Truth is, I grew up listening to my father verbally abuse my mother, and I'm afraid that I don't know how to have a normal relationship because of it. I went very still and felt my heart race. Your father was abusive? Like you wouldn't believe. He stopped stirring and let out a breath. I know it's probably not what you expected, but it's the truth. I don't have many relationships because I grew up with an abusive asshole for a father, and now there's some part of me that thinks I'll end up just like him. You wouldn't, though, I said without thinking. You don't know that. But I do. I stepped toward him and put my glass down on the counter. You're thinking about it, which means you're way more aware than your father ever was. You obviously care. I mean, you're a doctor. He smiled. Being a doctor doesn't make you immune from being abusive. No, but it means you want to help people. I'm sorry. I'm sure this isn't what you had in mind when you invited me up. He turned away, and I felt him shutting down. Without thinking, I reached out and touched his shoulder. He looked back at me, and the wooden spoon slipped from his fingers, falling to the floor. I didn't move, and he didn't either, as he stared down at me and took my hand in his, staring into my eyes. I felt a rush of something, dizzying and light, as he moved closer to me. Maybe we should leave this, he whispered, voice soft and gentle. Maybe it would be better if we walked away. There's always Bali. Do you really think that? No, he said, and kissed me. I kissed him back, unable to help myself. I twined my fingers through his hair, his thick, dark hair, and he pulled me tight, then turned me, pushing me back against the counter. I felt a hot, delicious need run through my core as his hands moved down my body, his palms on my ass, then up onto my chest, on my breasts. He went to pull up my sweatshirt, and a part of me started to panic. He'd see my scar, or he'd feel it, and then he'd hate me, he'd find me disgusting. But he didn't stop as his fingertips brushed against it. I sucked in a breath as he cupped my breasts, then kissed my neck and lifted me up onto the countertop. He spread my legs, and I let him come close. I bit his lower lip and looked into his eyes as he gripped my hair and pulled it back. A low moan escaped my lips, and I was unable to help it, unable to stop myself as he released a growl. He pulled my sweatshirt up, kissed my chest, my nipples, kissed down along my stomach, and I stared, heart racing, mind blank and wild with desire, as his lips found my scar. He didn't even hesitate. It didn't throw him out of the moment, didn't make him disgusted. He kissed it once, twice, then moved down, tugging my yoga pants off, and I was so surprised that I let them slide off and drop to the floor. He spread my legs and kissed my inner thigh, and I moaned, whispered his name as his tongue found me, licked me top to bottom, worked me and made me wild. He pushed aside my underwear and took me, fingers teasing, tongue driving me mad with pleasure and lust. He licked me top to bottom, spread me wide, fingers sinking inside, tongue rolling along my clit, and it felt like heaven. I moaned his name, panting and gasping, rolling my hips as he licked faster and faster, a growl in his throat, a purr like a lion. It was heaven. It was too much and much too far, but I wasn't going to stop, didn't want to stop. I needed more, and he kept pushing me, teasing me, driving me up to that edge, that incredible edge, and I moaned his name, whispering it, gasping it, until I felt the pleasure build and build into a spiraling crescendo as I came on his tongue. He lapped me up, not stopping, before he kissed me again. I tasted myself on his tongue and loved it, pressed myself hard against him, and he held me there as I breathed hard, sweat rolling down my back. I had to blink a few times to clear my blurry vision, and he smirked at me, head tilted to the side. That was unexpected. You invited me up for drinks. I know, but we both know what drinks means. Drinks means drinks. Drinks means I take your clothes off and make you feel good. He kissed me again and laughed. And cook you dinner, of course. I chewed my lip. What are we doing? We're just being people. He kissed me again. Forget about doctor and nurse for a second, okay? Okay, I said, and let him dress me again, let him lead me to the table, let him refill my wine glass, and let him finish cooking dinner. Then we ate, laughing, smiling, talking, and when he left for the night after offering to sleep on my couch, I felt strangely empty, strangely hollow, like I needed him back to feel complete. 16 Dean dreams of Fiona fluttered through my head. I hadn't expected that when she asked me into her apartment, even though drinks is almost always code for sex, at least with the girls I typically brought home. I was used to one-night stands, only sex, only two strange bodies coming together for a few hours of fucking, of release, and then nothing more. It was different with Fiona. I couldn't bring myself to take her like that, not yet, at least. I knew she needed more time to get used to the idea of taking our relationship to another level, of getting more physical. Something held her back the same way something held me back, and I knew it was more than the workplace drama of it all. I thought of the scar on her abdomen, jagged and nasty, and the taste of her lips, the taste of her coming, her moans ringing in my ear. I licked the sweat from her inner thigh and loved it, wanted more of it, wanted every inch of her like lightning in my body. She drove me to something I didn't understand yet. She made me want to break my rules. The next day, I had a morning shift, but she was off. I figured I'd check in on her during my lunch break and maybe at night if she wanted me to come over again. My goal was to convince her to stay with me for a while, and not just because I wanted her all to myself all the time, but because it would be safer if we stuck together. On my way outside, 2 shadows detached themselves from my building, and I barely had time to react. They came fast. The shorter one grunted like a bulldog and swung at me wildly. He hit me in the gut, and I staggered back, coughing with surprise. The taller one went to smash his fists down into my face, but I pulled back, instincts kicking in, fight or flight taking over. "Should have gone away," the shorter one said with a growl and came at me. I fought back. I hit him hard in the teeth, made his lips bleed, but the tall one got me from the side and smashed me up against the wall. I elbowed him in the nose and felt bone crunch, and a wild, sick glee came over me. All those years of training in martial arts while my father watched me, shouting at me to work harder, to fight through the pain, to take more hits and to dish out more punishment, it was all coming to fruition in this moment, all those years of fighting and blood and sweat. I did it to make my father happy, and I did it to make him shut the hell up. And now, as I smashed a fist into the tall guy's throat, I did it because it felt damn good. "Fuck you," I growled. "You piece of shit." I bashed my fist into the guy's face again and again, then threw him onto the stoop. He spit blood onto the concrete. "I'll kill you for going after Fiona, you motherfucker." I stepped toward him, intent on smashing my shoe into his ribs, but the shorter one barreled into me. I staggered, off balance, and my head hit the brick wall of my apartment building. I gasped in shock and saw stars and was too slow to block a flurry of blows. I was knocked to the ground as the shorter man pummeled me over and over again, cursing and cursing, before he stopped and stepped back. I was bleeding from my head, from my mouth, and I growled as I hauled myself to my feet. The shorter man helped the tall one stand. "Watch yourself, Doc," the short guy said as they limped away, walking as fast as they could. I stood there, gasping for breath, adrenaline rocketing through my system. I'd come so close to killing that man, and come so close to getting killed. If they'd wanted to end me, I'd be finished, without a doubt. All they had to do was shoot me, and I'd be gone. "Fuck," I grunted as pain began to hit me. A young girl stood across the street, maybe in her mid-20s, staring at me with wide eyes. I realized I was wearing scrubs, and she must have been pretty freaked out. I hurried up my stoop and back inside. I got Fiona on the phone a second later. "I need you," I said. "What's wrong?" She sounded like she had been asleep. "Those 2 guys, They jumped me. The ones from your apartment. She cursed. Are you okay? I'm alive. I grabbed a dish towel and used it to staunch the bleeding from my head wound. I might need stitches. Go to Mercy. I'll be there soon. No, I said. Please, come here. I have everything we need. Dean, she said, groaning. Please, I don't want to have to explain this, and I really don't want to give Maria the pleasure of seeing me hurt. She let out a sigh, but she agreed and hung up the phone. I sat there, waiting for her, head tipped back. I'd seen a lot of death and pain and suffering in my time as a doctor. I'd seen a lot of miraculous things, a lot of unlikely near misses. But this was the first time that I'd been on the other side, coming within inches of my own demise, and only surviving because my bastard of a father had forced me to learn how to fight as a child. I should have been dead, but I wasn't, and I felt a strange, eager giddiness. Fiona showed up 10 minutes later, looking haggard, wearing sweats again. She stormed into my place and grabbed the towel from me, prodding at the wound and shaking her head. This has to stop now, she said. This has to end. Time to move to an island? She gave me a hard look. Time to go to the police? Not yet. I shook my head and instantly regretted it. We don't have enough. What more do you want? A bullet wound? I grimaced. Not particularly. Then this has to be done. She pressed the towel back down hard against my scalp. Where's your medical bag? Bathroom, under the sink. I took the towel from her as she stomped off. I could tell she was angry and couldn't really blame her. I wondered when the last time was she stitched someone when she sat down next to me, dropped the medical bag on the kitchen table, and glared hot death. What were you thinking? I blinked once. Thinking? I guess I wasn't. You should have run. Why the hell would you fight them? I laughed, unable to help myself. She had no clue what my father had done to me growing up. It wasn't so bad, honestly. You look like shit and your forehead's ripped in half. She took the towel away and prodded at the wound. What the hell, Dean? At least it's not in my hair and you won't have to shave me. Like I would. I smiled at her as she prodded at the wound again, then took out antiseptic from the bag. She dabbed it on a clear bandage and pressed it against the wound. I sucked in a breath, but forced a smile on my face. She shook her head, annoyed, and got out the needle and thread I kept tucked in a pouch. There's a syringe for the pain, I said, nodding. She frowned and fished it out. You shouldn't have this, like Mercy would notice one missing. She shook her head and took the pre-filled syringe from its packaging. She held it up and glared at me. I'm serious. Before I get to work, tell me what you were thinking. I sighed and knew I couldn't get out of this. I told you my father wanted me to be a Marine, right? You mentioned something like that. He was disappointed you became a doctor. The guy put me through training. I paused for a second, trying to figure out how I could word it so that it didn't sound absolutely insane. I remembered my father standing over me in the backyard as I did push-ups, barking orders, hitting me with a piece of wood to toughen me up. But really it was torture, pure and simple, hours-long torture. He had me doing martial arts from a young age. You're joking. Like karate? I shook my head, then grimaced. No, not karate. Muay Thai, boxing, jiu-jitsu, real fighting. He took me to a gym once a week from when I was 11 to when I refused to go anymore at 15 and made me fight someone there. Not like a street fight, but mixed martial arts stuff, you know, the octagon and all that. That's insane. She leaned back, eyes wide. They let kids that young do that stuff. Not really. I mean, not officially, but we lived on military bases, so... I shrugged a little, like that explained anything. Not all guys in the military are assholes, obviously. But some are, some really, really are, and you put them in a culture that sort of encourages macho behavior, well, it makes them worse. God, I'm sorry. I can't imagine. Yeah, well, that's why I stood up to them. I figured if they wanted to kill me, they would have, and if they wanted to stab me, they would have. Since they came unarmed, I knew I had a chance. And did you win? She tilted her head. I smirked and shrugged. Fought them off. Got a head wound for your trouble? She sighed, but her expression relaxed, if only slightly. You still should have run? You're right. It's just, I was angry. She took the syringe and pressed the needle into my forehead. I clenched my jaw as it stung, and she shot some of the numbing solution into the skin. She did it a few more times, covering the area around the gash, until the skin there was completely dead to feeling. She put the needle away, nodded at her work, poked it a couple times to be sure, then began stitching. I could feel the skin pull with each swipe of the thread, but otherwise I felt nothing. "What were you so angry about?" she asked softly. "They came into your place. They threatened you, threatened both of us. And Maria thinks this is some kind of game, like those mafioso guys aren't going to try to kill one of us sooner or later." "You say that like they didn't already try with you." "They didn't." She tugged the thread and looked at me. "They didn't," I said again, completely sure of it. "They wanted to hurt me and scare me, but not kill me. Not yet." "How are you so damn sure all the time? If they wanted me dead, they could have killed me. The second I walked out of my place, they could have put a bullet in my head and been done with it. Maybe you're right." She did another stitch and tied it off. I admired how steady her hands were, and her technique was very good. I figured I'd have a scar, but she was being gentle and careful and precise, so it wouldn't be too bad. "But I still don't want you fighting them." "I'll keep that in mind." She gave me a look, but continued to work in silence. It took 6 stitches to close the wound up, which wasn't many, thankfully. When she finished and tied off the last, she added a bit of medical glue to ensure it stayed shut, then placed a bandage over top of it all and sat back. "You're going to have to explain this," she said, cleaning up. "I ran into a kitchen cabinet. Very clumsy. Oh, dear." She rolled her eyes and smiled a little. "I doubt anyone will believe it." "Sure they will. What else would they think? I'm getting into street fights with violent thugs." "Good point. Mary's going to think I did it." I laughed and helped pack the bag back up. I stood, feeling bruised and battered, but not as bad as I expected. Those thugs had wanted to hurt me, but I probably got them much worse, the taller one for sure, at least. I underestimated the smaller guy, but I wouldn't make that same mistake twice. Fiona lingered in the kitchen and watched as I got some water and gulped it down. I grimaced slightly and prodded my ribs. They weren't broken, but I'd definitely be bruised to hell. I turned and she stepped toward me, something on the tip of her tongue, but she shook her head and swallowed whatever she wanted to say. I grabbed her wrist and held it. "Thank you." She looked back at me. "For what?" "The stitches, and for coming here." "Of course," she said. "I'd do it for anyone." I tilted my head, a smile on my lips. "Would you?" She turned to me and chewed on her cheek. "It's not often I have to stitch up fight wounds. But you have to admit, it makes me seem very rugged and dashing." I was thinking more brittle and old. I gripped her wrist tighter and pulled her closer. "When are you going to stop pretending, Fiona? When this starts making sense." "It already does. You're not letting yourself see it." She stared at me, and her face took on a hard cast as she turned back toward the door and pulled her wrist away from me. "You're not the only one with a past, you know." I stared after her as she left, disappearing back outside and down the hall. I went to the door and wanted to call her back, wanted to ask her what she meant, but then the memory of her skin, the scar along her abdomen, so jagged and rough, drifted back into my mind, and I couldn't help but wonder if that was what she meant. I didn't know, couldn't know, and closed the door behind her, before drifting back into my apartment to call the hospital and get someone to cover my shift, then to recuperate the best I could. 17 Fiona. I couldn't bring myself to stay in that apartment with him. Not when he looked so battered and broken. Not when all I wanted to do was kiss him and hold him and take care of him. I felt like such a piece of crap as I headed into Mercy for my shift, walking fast and keeping my head down, afraid that Aldo and David would pop out from behind a car at any moment and steal me away. I kept thinking about that deep cut along his forehead, and how much it bled all over his face and clothes, and how he didn't even flinch when I pushed the syringe into his skin. The story he told about his father training him as a child, I believed every word. I saw it in his eyes, the anger and the uncertainty, the wish that it hadn't happened at all. Some part of me wanted to take that away from him, that pain, but I knew that wasn't how the past worked. It never disappeared, not completely. Some days I forgot about the accident. I could pretend that it never happened and that I was still a whole person, not scarred and broken and stained. Some days I drift through the afternoon with a smile on my face, almost like I'm just another normal girl. But then it comes back to me in one sharp moment, and suddenly I remember it all, the stippled skin on my stomach, the rot inside of me. I'm torn and broken and ruined, and no matter how much I try to forget it, the past never goes away. Not completely. He couldn't outrun his past any more than I could outrun mine. There was nothing I could do for him, and that hurt almost as much as seeing him beaten and bloody and bruised. I drifted through my shift like a ghost. I hated moving on autopilot, like the world was passing me on a conveyor belt, but I couldn't figure out how to concentrate. The acidic stink of body odor, the musky scent of blood and death, couldn't penetrate my yards-long stare, and as I sat behind the desk surrounded by old pens, the black keyboard marked with finger oil, some of the letter keys beginning to fade into nothing, the screen marked and scratched from years of impatient and annoyed nurses, I barely managed to hold myself together, like the stitches I'd given Dean were really meant for my chest to hold everything inside. And as soon as it began, it was over, and another day was lost to me, gone forever. I wandered into the lobby in a daze, thinking about Dean, about the stitches, about the pain he must have felt when he was attacked on the street in broad daylight, about the anger he held inside for his father, and there he was, standing near the exit, leaning up against the wall with his arms crossed over his chest, Dean with his lopsided smile, a fresh bandage on his head, wearing jeans and a long-sleeve shirt. I walked to him, tilting my head, unable to stop the smile. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "You need a ride home, right?" I laughed. "You didn't have to do that." He held out a hand. I hesitated, but took it, suddenly not caring who saw or thought or talked. "I know I didn't have to, but I wanted to. I feel bad for not driving you in." We walked out together, and I dropped his hand as soon as we hit the sidewalk. I didn't know why. It felt good, walking hand in hand with him, but I didn't want him to think there was something more than the pleasure of touching another person, and anyway, he took me right to his car. I sat leaning back, staring up at the roof, and wondered why I kept pushing him away, why I let the past define everything I did, every motion, every step and thought. A tree of heaven grew up in an abandoned lot beside a row house, the long teardropped leaves glistening with its oils, and I wondered how many of those grew in the city, hundreds, maybe thousands, an invasive species, impossible to root out, like the city itself. "You should come up with me," I said, turning to look at him. He gazed back and didn't smile. "Are you sure?" There was no ambiguity in his voice, no questioning in his eyes. "I'm sure." He nodded once and found a spot a few doors down from my place. He followed me up and inside, and I shut the door behind him, locking it tight. I took 2 steps before he swept me into his arms, then pinned me back against the wall. I sucked in a breath as his lips found my neck, his hands already lifting my scrubs up over my head. I let him strip me down, glad to be out of my work clothes, as his hands moved along my skin like he was questing for something, searching for a truth somewhere, and God, I wanted him to find it. He kissed me then, bit my lower lip, teased my breasts, took off my bra. I loved his warm, powerful body, the way he took and took and took without hesitation, so long as I was willing to give. And in this moment, I was willing. I couldn't help myself. All afternoon, I kept thinking about his injuries, about him getting into that fight, about the pain he must have felt when I stitched him back together, but he didn't show it, not once. And above all, I thought of what it would be like to lose him, and I realized I couldn't handle it, not really, couldn't live with the thought of him gone, out of my life, out of the world. I'd be gone too, sooner or later, a wreck of myself, nothing at all. It wasn't only because of the mafia, though they were still a threat, lingering and looming in my mind, but it was also that he'd woken something inside of me, made me want something more than the mindless days I'd been drifting through. I realized as his fingers slipped between my legs, as he teased my clit and made my moan into his ear, that I'd been drifting a lot, moving through my weeks like I barely existed, like I was hardly even there. I hadn't realized, not really, not until he showed me what it felt like to be alive, and I wanted that all the time. I bit his lip and kissed him deep, then tugged at his shirt until it came off. I didn't care about my rules, about my fears. His fingers felt like heaven, his mouth made sparks run down my spine, and none of it mattered. He licked my nipples, made them hard, my skin stubbled with goosebumps as I tugged down his jeans and took his hard shaft in my hands. He groaned his pleasure, and I pushed back against him as he slipped his fingers inside of me. He turned me around and pinned me to the wall. I gasped and whispered his name, wanting him to take me, take over. His hands gripped my hair as he pressed his cock against my ass. Then he knelt down and peeled my panties off, pulling them to the floor. I stood there naked in front of him, legs spread, pussy wet, mouth hanging open. He looked at me, his boxer briefs coming off, his cock long and thick and hard, his muscular chest and stomach gorgeous. I wanted to run my fingers through his hair, but I wouldn't move, not until he told me. His fingers slid inside of me again as he gripped my hair. "I've been dreaming about this," he whispered. "Your tight body, your beautiful ass." "I bet you have," I gasped as his fingers teased me, pleasure rocketing through my spine. "Your bruises look nasty." He laughed as I turned to stare back at him. I wasn't kidding. Blue-black bloomed on his ribs, and I guessed one was broken, or at least cracked. He didn't seem to mind, though. "Nasty or manly, it doesn't matter." He pulled my hair tighter, and I gasped as his fingers pushed deeper. "I'd take 100 beatings if it meant you finally let me taste you." "You think I'm fucking you out of pity?" "I think you realized how much you want me, and you're finally letting down your guard." "I don't have a guard." "That's the lie of the century." He kissed me, and I moaned into that, then felt him press himself against me and slowly sink inside. I gasped as he filled me, and a shiver ran down my skin. Oh God, it was incredible. He fit me deep, spread me wide, and he took me, slowly at first, so slowly, my hips rocking back against him, riding along him, moving in rhythm with him, but it went faster as my pants turned into moans and faster and harder as we lost ourselves in the moment, and there was only him and pleasure. His hand hit my ass hard, the palm making a loud slap, and he pulled my hair, rough and desperate, and I pushed back along his shaft, wanting more, feeling so greedy and wild for it, feeling so awake and alive for the first time in a long time. "I love the way you look at me," he whispered, "when I sink inside of you. It's like you can't believe how it feels, how I fit, and I want more of that look." I stared at him over my shoulder, and he growled, taking me rough, and I gasped as his hands teased my breasts. "As much as you want," I whispered. He pulled me away from the wall, and we tumbled onto the couch. I straddled him, and his hands guided my hips back, then down, and I rode him like that, biting down against his shoulder. I felt sweat drip along my skin as I went faster, faster, building momentum. He grunted his pleasure, his hands on my body, on every inch of my skin, my breasts, my ass, my legs, my lower back, my hair and cheeks and lips. I sucked his finger and stared into his eyes, working my hips faster, faster, getting so close, moaning, gasping, biting. "Come on, Fiona," he said, fingers dimpling my hips. "Come on, girl. I want to see it. I want to feel it. You hide so much from me, and now I want to taste it all." "Oh, fuck," I said, curling my spine, leaning toward him, kissing him hard as I rode faster, rolling forward and around. "I can't get enough of your hips, your mouth, your hands. I love the way you gasp and moan and whisper my name. God damn, Fiona, you drive me insane." I kept going, faster, staring into his eyes, and I felt it there, blooming between us, and it overtook me suddenly without warning. I came then, gasping, sweating, shivering, and he held me, buried between my legs, held me and took me. As I finished, he turned me, put me down on the couch, and pinned me with his gorgeous body. I wrapped my legs around him and felt him shudder and moan into my ear, then fill me up, his back stiffened, a moan on his lips. We finished together, sweating and dizzy. I lay there, staring up at him, legs in his lap, as he sat sprawled with his legs open and his arms up above his head. "Well, shit," I said. "How about that?" He laughed and looked at me. "How about it? I didn't expect—" I stopped myself and shook my head. "Okay, I expected it. We both know what you meant when you asked me up. I guess you're right. I mean, seeing you like that, beaten up." I stopped myself. He smiled a little, and his fingers traced a line down my collarbone, down my breasts, along my hard nipples, and down to my stomach. I grimaced as he touched my scar, and I pushed his hand away. He hesitated and watched me. "You want to talk about it?" he asked. "No." I covered it with both hands and turned my face away. I wished he'd stop looking at me. "It was an accident, right?" I squeezed my eyes shut. "Dean, please," he grunted softly. "Okay, we don't have to talk about it, but I want to, just so you know. I want to know what's been keeping you so far from me." I shifted and rolled away, getting off the couch. He watched me, his eyes tracking my movements, and I felt so exposed. I grabbed my clothes, my dirty old scrubs, and pulled them on, desperate to cover myself. I lingered near the door, biting my lip, angry with myself for letting that ruin the moment, and angry with him for bringing it up. "Maybe we should—" I started, but he stood and shook his head. "No, you're not closing down on me now." I smiled a little and looked to the side. "I'm not sure you have much say in that, Fiona." He stalked across the room to me and pressed a hand against my cheek. I shrugged him away. "Let's just leave it, okay? That was good, and I don't want to complicate things." He let out a frustrated breath. "I know you don't." "Then let's leave it." He nodded. "All right, I'll let it go, but I don't want to leave." "Maybe you should." "No, I shouldn't. I'll cook you dinner. Go take a shower, clean off the hospital, and when you get out, I'll pour you some wine and we'll eat." I opened my mouth to argue, to tell him to get out, that he'd crossed a line and there was no going back, but stopped myself. That was the old Fiona, the version of myself that drifted, and I wanted to be better. "All right," I said, "but it better be good. I'll do what I can with your meager options." I smiled a little, and he touched my cheek. I turned into it and kissed his fingers, then pulled away and walked back to my bathroom. I glanced back and caught him staring at me with a strange look on his face, half smile, half concern. I shut the door, locked it, and turned on the water. Then I sat on the edge of the shower and mourned the girl I used to be before becoming broken, the girl that could have simply been happy in this moment with a man like him, but instead ended up alone and unable to keep anyone around, constantly pushing people away. But I'd be better. I'd shower and go out there, eat and drink, and maybe he'd sleep over, and maybe we'd fuck again, and maybe things would be okay in the morning. 18, Dean. She kicked me out after dinner. I knew it was coming. As soon as I touched that scar, I knew she'd close up and push me away. Something happened to her, and I was willing to bet that whatever it was, that was the reason she constantly pushed back against anyone that tried to get too close. It was a shame, because in those good moments between entering her apartment, kissing her, taking her, I felt like she finally opened up and was herself, up until I fucked things up. She'd figure it out eventually. I knew I couldn't rush it. Sooner or later, she'd open up, and we'd move past whatever held her back. In the meantime, I still had a mafia to fight. The next morning, I limped to work, aching and fairly certain I had a broken rib after all. I'd have to get that imaged sooner or later to make sure nothing internal was fucked up. But first, I wanted to get back to the real work. Dr. Chen answered his phone on the second try. I had my feet up on my desk, reclining back in my chair, when he picked up. "Yes, hello? Who is this?" He sounded annoyed, with a neutral accent that I couldn't quite place. "My name is Dr. Dean Corse. I work in the neuro department at Mercy General," I said. "Is this Dr. Chen?" A short pause. "Yes, that's me." "How did you get this number, Dr. Corse?" "A friend of a friend." I hesitated, trying to figure out how to put this into words. "I was hoping you might be able to help me with a problem involving a certain family." He let out what sounded like a long-suffering sigh. "I'm free for lunch. You're buying." "Of course. There's a deli on 5th and Washington. Meet me there at noon." "I'll be there." He hung up the phone. I blinked for a second, then let out a little laugh. I was going to a South Philly deli with a mafia doctor, one I'd never met before, and somehow that was the least insane thing happening in my life at the moment. I spent the rest of the morning doing rounds, and as noon approached, I ducked out and drove down south. Parking was easy, and I walked slowly down the block, noting a large empty lot covered in chicory and fireweed, the long, mangy stalks sprouting like alien tree vessels. A bull thistle bush sprouted between the links, and I brushed my fingers across it. The fence line led to a long block of commercial shops, with old men in tank tops sitting out front on folding chairs in the shade, young kids roaming in packs, laughing loudly, and I felt like I was swimming in the slow, languid river of the city. The deli wasn't hard to find. An old sign sat out front above the door, proclaiming itself the deli. Not the most creative name, but fine. I stepped inside and was assaulted by the smell of meats, cheese, pickles, and fryer oil. The floor was sticky with it, and the place was packed with tables and chairs, almost all of them empty, except for one in the back corner. A large barrel sat next to the cash register, and the glass cases looked like they were fogged over from age, which was totally possible. In Philly, there were delis that had been in operations for over 100 years. I scanned the space and stared at a small man with gray hair sitting in the back by himself at a round table. He had sharp, dark eyes and the tan skin of someone that spends a lot of time outdoors. He leaned toward me and nodded once, and I drifted toward him, head tilted. "Dr. Chen? You must be Dean Corse." He gestured. "Take a seat." I lingered, looking at him for a moment. He wore a rumpled white button-down shirt tucked into khakis, and as far as I could tell, he seemed all around average, but I supposed a mafia doctor wouldn't draw attention to himself. I pulled out the chair opposite him and sat down. "Thanks for meeting with me. I have to admit I was a little curious. I don't get called very often to deal with civilians, but when I do, they always seem to come from your hospital." I hesitated and let a smile play across my face. "I guess you're referencing Gavin." That's the one. Dr. Chen gave me the barest of smiles in return. I assume that's where you got my contact information. That's right. How's he doing? Alive and well, from what I know. That's good to hear. There was a time when that wasn't so certain. He tilted his head, the smile disappearing. What can I do for you, Doctor? Course? I have a problem. His eyes flicked up to the bandage on my head, then back down. Seems as though that's true. It's our hospital administrator. I believe she's involved with... I hesitated, not sure how to phrase it. Your employers. That could be true. My employers have their fingers in many pots. I think she's been laundering money for them. I can't prove it yet, but I want to. And you think I'd help you with that? He seemed surprised and leaned forward. Tell me why the hell I would. Because you helped Gavin, which means you're not a bad person. Good and bad don't have anything to do with it. Dr. Chen's eyes were cold and calm. I'm more pragmatic than anything else. As I sat there, looking back into his neutral expression, I realized that I'd made a huge error in judgment. I assumed Chen helped Gavin back then because Chen was a halfway decent guy and was willing to help a doctor in need. But maybe I had completely miscalculated. There could have been mitigating circumstances that I wasn't aware of, and any one of those circumstances could be the reason why Chen got involved, none of which would exist now. He was right that he had no real reason to help me. 2 men assaulted me the other day. You're a doctor. You can't condone that sort of thing. If I didn't condone violence, then I'd be out of the job fairly quickly. I grimaced. Perhaps condone isn't the right word. Listen to me carefully, Dr. Corse. I have no reason to help you right now, and I don't expect I ever will, unless you give me one. I tilted my head and let that sink in. I can pay. Now I'm listening. I need to know what they have on my hospital admin and what they've been doing. I need proof, Dr. Chen, or else Maria is going to keep trying to roll over me. He leaned back. She knows you're looking into her? I nodded. I believe she's the one that sent the goons after me to begin with. You might be right. I've never met a hospital administrator that wasn't also a killer at heart. You'd like Maria then. He watched me thoughtfully for a moment. I'm not sure I can give you what you want, he admitted. I have access, but not that much access. Then I'm not sure what I'd pay you for. I'll make a suggestion then. You need proof that the hospital administrator is laundering money, correct? We stole documents from Maria's office, but found nothing conclusive. Then you need to go after the accountants. He tapped a finger on the table. It's always the accountants. I laughed softly, shaking my head. I didn't know why I hadn't thought of that yet, but of course the hospital kept meticulous records of every dollar in and every dollar out, and whatever accounting firm did the hospital's taxes would have records of it all. Seems like you helped me more than you planned, Dr. Chen. He smiled, cold and vicious. Perhaps, but perhaps not. I'll let you have this one for free, but I'm going to want a favor in return. What favor? Any favor I desire? He crossed his arms. Think of it like The Godfather. You've seen that movie? Of course. I didn't think the mafia actually worked that way. It most certainly does. There's nothing better than being able to demand any sort of payment you desire at any given date. His smile got larger. One day, I'll demand payment from you, and you'll give it to me. I'm not so sure about that. I pushed back from the table. He slapped a palm down. The men behind the counters didn't so much as look over, and Chen's eyes went cold and terrible again. One day, and that day may never come, but I will ask you for something, and you will give it to me. Do you understand? I met his gaze and nodded once. I understand. Good. He sat back. I'll see what I can dig up on my end. Perhaps I can at least get them to back off for the time being. I believe the man you're ultimately dealing with is named Stephen, and he's one of the more reasonable capos in the city, believe it or not. That's good to know. Don't mistake being reasonable for being soft. Stephen will gladly kill you if you prove to be a nuisance, which you already are. Fly low, Dr. Corse, and keep your head down. I suspect you'll deal with his men again sooner or later." I nodded to him, then turned and left the deli. I felt eyes on me as I stepped into the street, and for one wild second, I thought the whole city was alive with spies, staring at me, watching me, and judging every movement I made, ready to jump out of the shadows, ready to come cut my throat. It was paranoia, I knew, but not without reason. The city was in debt to these mobsters, and now I was in debt to their doctor. I walked back to the car, got in, and drove back slowly, keeping an eye on my rearview mirror, watching to see if I was being followed, but finding nothing. 19, Fiona. The more I thought about Dean's hands on my skin, the more I wanted it, and the more it scared the hell out of me. His curiosity made me want to push him away, but it also made me want to embrace him. He touched my scar and didn't act like I was disfigured. If anything, he seemed like he thought it was beautiful and wanted to know more, wanted to touch it more. His fingers lingering on my skin sent shivers down my spine, and I knew I'd want more. I'd want so much more sooner or later. I couldn't hold back, not forever, unless I did something about it. He found me in the hospital a day later, sitting behind the nurse's station. Mary was in a patient room, and I was trying to pretend that I wasn't exhausted, emotionally and physically, when he leaned up against the desk and smiled at me. "How's your day going?" he asked. I shrugged, playing it cool, even though my heart raced whenever he came around. "It's fine," I said. "Are you sure you want to stand here talking to me? There's going to be gossip." He laughed. "There's already gossip. But, we have to talk about something. Is there a private spot nearby?" I hesitated, then nodded and stood. I found Mary, told her I was ducking out for a second, then took Dean down the hall and into an empty room. He shut the door, pulled the privacy screen, and faced me. "What's going on?" I asked when I saw the look on his face. "I met with Dr. Chen." I sucked in a breath. "What happened?" He gave me an idea for what we should do next. "He helped you, just like that?" He paused, then shook his head. "I owe him a favor now." I groaned. "So, you're involved with the mob?" "Something like that. I'm not sure he's technically in their family, more like a contractor." "That's so much better. Do you want to know the plan or not?" I turned away and paced across the room, head spinning. I had so much I wanted to say to him, and most of it had nothing to do with the mafia and our little predicament. Still, that was the biggest problem we faced at the moment, and so I gestured. "Tell me," I said. "Accountants." He held his chin up. "We're going after the accountants." "Sounds exciting." He laughed. "Think about it. We need documentation that money's going missing, right? The accountants will have it." "Dean, stop. This is insane. You want to break into their office? That has to be too far, even for you." "We have no choice." He stepped closer. I stepped back like we were doing some new dance. "The mob's going to keep coming after us no matter what we do at this point. Our only hope is to discredit Maria, get her fired, and make it so that the family can't come after us." "And you think you can do that by ruining their plans?" His eyes narrowed. "I think that's our only chance." "Come on, Dean, this is insane. You have to know that." "What's wrong? You seem tense." I stopped pacing and faced him, arms down at my sides, hands curled into fists. I stared at him for a second, trying to understand how he could even say that. Of course I was tense. This whole situation was tense and stressful. It felt like my life hung in the balance every second of every day, and I didn't know how to handle that. "I'm not sure I can do this." The words came out softer than I expected, and I felt tears in my eyes. I couldn't cry, not right now. I had to be strong if I was going to pull this off, If I cried, it would ruin everything, and I couldn't afford to fail right now. If you need to back down, you want something that I can't ever give you, okay? He looked confused, head tilted. I'm sorry, Fiona. I don't know what you mean. Come on. I threw up my hands. You saw the scar. You said you want a family. You want the truth about me? Of course I do, he said softly. But I wasn't going to press. I can't have children. I felt the words come out of my mouth like hot lava. I turned my back on him and paced to the window, heart racing, head dizzy. I stared outside and realized that I hadn't told anyone about the accident or my condition in a very long time, and saying the words out loud was a bigger struggle than I had anticipated. Fiona, he said softly, but I shook my head hard. It's fine, okay? I've known for a long time, and now you know, too. I can't have kids, which means I can't ever give you a family. I'm sorry, but it's the truth, and so we don't have to keep playing this game. I don't care about that. He stepped toward me, and I turned to face him, so angry I could barely see straight. How can you even say that? You told me the other night you want a family, and now I'm telling you that's not possible with me. Think about this for 1 second. Maybe you're having fun with me right now, but what about 5 years from now? 10 years? I'll never be able to give you children, no matter what we do. I'm broken, Dean. You're not broken. His eyes were wide, and I could tell he was struggling with what to say. I hated this, hated it so much. I felt disgusting and exposed, and I wrapped my arms around myself like I was trying to hug my guts back inside. He'd say the right things, and in the end, it wouldn't matter. This was why I never got involved with men, because in the end, it never mattered, never changed a thing. I was broken, couldn't have children, and never would, and I hated myself for it, and hated the world for making me this way. I didn't want his pity, or his confusion, or his anger, or anything at all. I just wanted to be left alone. You don't have to do anything, okay? We can be done. We'll figure out the mafia thing, but after that, we're not done. His tone was almost harsh, and it made me pause, at least for a moment. We're far from done. You think I want you for children? I don't give a damn about children. You're not broken, Fiona. I don't want children. I want you, all of you, exactly the way you are. So what if you can't have kids? That made you who are you today, and that's the girl I want. I chewed my lip, heart racing, as he came closer again. That was the right thing to say, damn it, the exact right thing. I wanted to kiss him, to throw myself at him, and let him have me, all of me, exactly the way I was, broken, shattered, partial. But instead, I stepped away from him and went around, walking fast to the door. He turned and watched me go, confusion and sadness and hurt flickering through his expression. I pushed aside the privacy screen, its metal rings making a steel scrape along the ceiling bar, then lingered as I looked back. It's not about you, okay? I wanted him to understand, but I knew he couldn't. It's about me and what I am, and I can't get involved. The other night was fun, and I had a really good time. I just can't go down that road. His face hardened then, his lips turning into a tense smile. Whatever you say. Good. I slid open the door. Thank you for that conversation, Dr. Corse. We'll talk later about your plan. He grunted as I stepped out and let the door slide shut behind me. I walked fast away from the room, but not back to the nurse's station. I headed for a bathroom I knew would be empty, ducked inside, locked the door, sat on top of the toilet seat, and finally let myself cry. I felt pathetic and weak. I hated myself for doing this, for ending things with a man I really liked, but also for crying about it, and for letting it get to this point. I was supposed to be better than that, able to rise above petty shit and stupid feelings, but clearly I wasn't. Even after telling him I didn't want to be involved, I still wanted him bad, and I didn't know what to do about it. I stayed there for a few minutes, then got up and got myself together. I couldn't let Mary see me like this, so I washed my face and waited a little while for my eyes to stop being quite so red. I walked slowly back to the station and slumped back down in my chair. "You okay?" Mary asked when she joined me a few minutes later. "You look like hell." "I'm fine," I said. "You know how this place can be." She nodded, eyes distant. "I sure do, sweetheart. You want to talk about it?" "Not at all." She sat down next to me and didn't say anything more, and I knew she wouldn't gossip about this. There was an unspoken understanding between everyone that worked at Mercy. The hospital was a force of nature in itself, and it could get the better of anyone, at any time, for any reason. Sometimes you broke down, had a good cry, and moved on, and everyone learned not to ask too many questions. Mary might have been a gossip, but she understood how things went around here. One day I'd return that favor to her, I was sure of it. I leaned back in my chair and thought of Dean back in that room, telling me he didn't care about having kids, and only cared about me. Maybe he meant it, and maybe it was true, but it wouldn't always be. If he wanted kids, even a little bit, sooner or later he'd resent me for being unable to give him any, and we'd never be able to get past it. I knew it'd happen, whether he thought it would or not, and I wasn't going to let whatever we had get ruined because I was too broken. So I'll let it go. I'll mourn it for a while and think about that night fondly, but I'll move on because I'm strong, and because I've gotten used to living with myself like this. We'll fight, Maria, and maybe we'll win or maybe we won't, but the relationship has to be over. Otherwise, I don't know what I'll do or how I can live with myself. 20. Dean, I kept thinking about Fiona, about the way she spoke to me in that room, but most of all about the hurt in her eyes, the pain in her expression, and it killed me. She had no clue at all. Whatever happened that caused her to be unable to have children so clearly defined everything she did. She lived her life assuming that she was broken and that nobody could love her because she was flawed in that one specific way, and yet I couldn't care less about that. Having kids wasn't the most important thing in the world. I didn't need her to be able to carry my babies, and even if that was something we both agreed we wanted one day, there were so many other options, like surrogates or adoption. Her being unable to have children was such a small thing, such a minor problem, and yet, standing in that room with her, watching the way she spoke about herself, the way she looked at me, I could tell that in her mind it was her defining quality. I didn't know how to convince her that it simply wasn't that important to me, that I cared about her way more than I cared about having children with her. Sharing a life together, that was something I wanted. I gave her space. Even though I wanted to hunt her down that day and tell her exactly how I felt, wanted to find her and convince her to listen, I kept away and focused on my job. I lost myself in work, or at least I tried to, even if she was still on my mind, still lingering in the back of my mind every second of every day. Obviously, I couldn't let it last. She didn't show up for a ride home that night, and the next morning she didn't come out when I called or knocked. Part of me was worried until I got a text from her. "Don't worry, already at the hospital." I knew what she was doing. She meant it when she said she wanted this to be over, that she thought it needed to end, and now she was putting herself in danger to put distance between us. The rides to and from work weren't only for fun and because I liked being with her, but because those thugs might make a move on her at any moment, and I couldn't allow that to happen. And yet, now that she was pulling away, I couldn't protect her. I had to do something. I knew I needed to give her space and to let her figure this out on her own, but I couldn't sit by and let something bad happen. I got to the hospital, got myself prepped for the day, then went looking for her before I had to go do rounds. But I didn't get far. As I walked down the hall, heading away from my office, I stopped near the elevators as Maria stepped out. She looked around, then spotted me, and a smile slid across her face as she stalked toward me like a lion on the prowl. I clenched my jaw and crossed my arms over my chest, drawing myself up to my full height. That didn't seem to bother her. She stared up at me with a smile and stopped a few feet away, one hand lingering against the wall, her fingernails long and black. "Dr. Corse," she said, "just the man I was looking for. Do you have a minute?" "Not right now," I said. "I'm busy, actually. Maybe we can speak later. If you'll excuse me." I went to step around her, but she cleared her throat. "This is important, Dean." Her eyes were sharp, and as much as I wanted to tell her to fuck off, I knew I had to hear her out. "Let's talk in my office." I turned and went back inside. She followed, but left the door open behind her. "Smaller than I thought," she commented, a little smile on her lips. I didn't know why that annoyed me so much, but I had to push my anger back. "What do you want?" "We need to talk. If you're here to threaten me, I'm not interested." She laughed softly. "I'm here to give you one more chance, actually. Maria, you have no power in this situation," she said, stepping closer. I leaned up against my desk and glared at her. "You're a good doctor and popular with your patients, but at the end of the day, you're still only a doctor. You're replaceable, but you're not acting that way. You wouldn't—" "I would and I will if you don't promise you'll stop snooping." I clenched my jaw. "I'm not interested in more empty threats. I have rounds to do." "Your patients can wait." "Can they? Since when do you know a damn thing about this hospital, Maria? You launder your dirty money and profit off it nicely, but when it comes to the people here, you're clueless." She only smiled and shook her head. "That's not what I want to hear from you, doctor." "Then I'll say this. Go to hell. I'm going to find proof of what you're doing, and when I do, you're finished." She sighed and ran a hand through her hair. Her fingernails acted like claws, brushing along, separating the strands. "Last chance. Tell me you're going to stop this stupidity, and we can all move on. The hospital is fine, Dr. Corse. Patients aren't being hurt. So what if I make a little extra money on the side? Nothing is taken away. None of this matters. You're on some foolish crusade, and it's your own actions that are going to lead to serious problems." I stood up and stared at her. "I'm finished with this." "All right, then." She turned and left my office without another word. I frowned, staring after her. I hesitated before I walked out into the hall, then stopped completely when I spotted Maria down near the elevators again, but this time speaking with 2 security guards. My heart started racing as they looked at me and their faces went blank. I'd seen that look before, right when they come to throw out some unruly family member or a drug addict that's pretending to be hurt to get some pills. That was the look of 2 men that were about to do something unsavory and weren't excited about the prospect. But Maria's face was jubilant. She walked back toward me, arms swinging, a huge grin on her face. "Dr. Corse, I gave you one last chance, and since you're not interested in helping this hospital out, I have no recourse but to dismiss you. Please, follow these gentlemen out. You can pick up your things tomorrow." I stared at her, and for one moment my heart stopped. Being a doctor at Mercy was everything to me. My whole life was this place, my identity, my reason for living. If I couldn't be a doctor, I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. I didn't move, I was rooted to the spot, and one of the guards came toward me, a white guy with a thick neck and a huge gut. "Sorry, doctor, but if you'd come with me, please?" I looked at Maria. "You can't do this. You can't fire me." "I can, and I did. If you would be so kind as to go with these gentlemen, Dr. Corse, we'll work out the logistics of your dismissal some other time." I clenched my jaw. I had the insane urge to fight these guys, but they were only doing their jobs. It was Maria I wanted to hurt, wanted to smash her face through the wall and leave her skull in bits and pieces. But instead of doing anything stupid, I strode to the elevators. The guards walked behind me. They didn't touch me, but it was very clear that they were going to escort me out. I hesitated and felt a strange, sudden pulse of shame. I hated myself for it, but I wondered what it would look like when I walked out of here, flanked by two goons. Everyone would know about it, everyone would hear, and the gossip would be horrible. The things they'd say, God damn, I couldn't picture how I'd recover. And yet that didn't matter. Truly, it didn't. All these people could fuck themselves, since they didn't know shit about why I was getting fired. The only person that mattered was Fiona. I couldn't see her, couldn't speak to her, and I needed to worse than I could imagine. She was going to hear secondhand about this, and I didn't want to picture what she was going to think. But no, she had to know. She'd realize what happened. Maria was the enemy, and I couldn't let myself forget it. I stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the lobby. The guards joined me, but Maria lingered and waved. "Thank you for your cooperation, Dr. Corse," she said, practically bouncing on her toes with joy. "It's been a pleasure working with you." Then the doors slid shut and left me alone. The elevator dropped down in silence. I stood there, seething, boiling with pure animal rage. I wanted to hurt something, break someone. But instead, when the door opened to a lobby packed with former colleagues and patients, I kept my head held high as I marched toward the exit. The guards came with me, keeping a respectful distance, but I saw the looks. Surprise, shock, outrage, confusion, wicked glee. The nurses and doctors down here knew what was happening, they all knew what was going on, and it would get back to Fiona. Good. She needed to know, because she might be next. And maybe it wasn't too late to save her. 21, Fiona. It tapped on my phone's screen for the 50th time that morning. I kept waiting for a message from Dean, kept thinking he'd reply to my text or maybe come down to see me, but he didn't do either. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt strangely hurt and angry. I didn't have any right to feel that way. I told him very clearly that I wanted to end things between us, that I didn't want to continue whatever relationship was beginning to grow. I told him I wanted to end that aspect of whatever we were doing and focus on finishing things with Maria and those bastards she was working for. I couldn't be shocked that he listened to what I said. It was a busy morning and I lost myself in work. That helped, at least a little bit, and I didn't have time to sit down and chat with Mary until mid-morning rolled around. I sighed as I relaxed into my chair, feet already beginning to ache, when Mary leaned forward, gave me a strange look that was somewhere between pity and confusion, and put a hand on my shoulder. "Dr. Corse got fired this morning," she said, squeezing a little. "I'm sorry." I stared at her, blinking in confusion. "What are you talking about?" She dropped her hand away. "I heard it through the grapevine, you know. People saw him escorted out of the lobby, and one of the nurses stopped him and asked him what was happening, and he said he got fired. I know, it's crazy, right?" I sat up straight, heart racing. "That can't be true." "It's true. I mean, there are a bunch of witnesses." She hesitated. "You two know each other pretty well, right? I mean, I've seen you talking a lot. Do you know what happened? You don't have to tell me, but—" I pushed back from the desk and stood. "It has to be some mistake. Sweetie, I don't think—" I shook my head and walked toward the hall. "Cover me, okay?" "Fiona, please, hold on." "Sorry, Mary. I'll owe you one. Hell, I'll owe you two, but it's a mistake, okay? Just cover me." I walked away, head spinning, feeling like I might walk off the edge of the earth. I couldn't imagine Dean getting fired, not for something real at least. This was Maria's doing. She pulled strings and made this happen somehow. I didn't know what she did, who she bribed, but if Dean truly was fired, I could only guess how he felt. This place was his life. Mercy had a way of hooking itself into you and making you believe there was no world outside of its tile halls and constantly beeping monitors. Mercy was an ecosystem in itself, and most people couldn't imagine going anywhere else. I was sure Dean felt that way. He was a star in the hospital, had his own damn office, got to do more or less whatever he wanted, picked his own patients, skipped clinic duty more often than not, more or less had the run of the place. If he got fired, I could guess the sort of things he was feeling, and I couldn't let him feel that way all alone. I hit the street and caught a lucky cab right out front. The driver took me to Dean's place, and I got out and stormed up to his front door. My heart was pounding when I knocked, and the cab drove away behind me. I pictured a broken man, wrecked by his own sorrow, torn asunder by his pain, and instead Dean opened the door, looking freshly showered, a smile on his face. "I was wondering when you'd show up." I stared at him. "I heard about you getting fired. Come inside." I followed him into the kitchen. He leaned up against a counter and sipped a half-empty glass of whiskey, probably why he seemed so happy. "Are you okay?" I asked, lingering near the table. "I'm fine. Honestly, I should have seen it coming." I shook my head. "It's messed up, Dean. She can't fire you. I mean, does she even have that power?" "Apparently." Security escorted me out. I grimaced. "God, I'm so sorry." "It's really okay." He put the glass down. "We have another job to do." I stared at him. "What?" "The accounting firm that does Mercy's taxes has an office out in the suburbs. We're going to break in and—" I held up my hands. "Hold on, Dean, wait, hold on. What the hell are you talking about? Accountants. We need documents to prove that Maria's been moving money around. The only place that'll have those documents that haven't been altered in some way is this accounting firm. I already called them and pretended to be working for Maria, and they said they have the files in the Doylestown office and—" "Dean," I said, my voice harder than intended, but I couldn't let him keep going. "You got fired. Why are you still talking about this?" He blinked, surprised, and tilted his head. "Because Maria's still in power at Mercy, whether I work there or not, and I'm going to make sure she's stopped." I stood there, trying to understand. When he worked at the hospital, he had 1,000 reasons to want to put himself on the line to get rid of a corrupt official like Maria. That sort of thing got people killed, even if only in incidental ways, but still, it was dangerous, and any doctor would want to root it out. But he didn't work at Mercy anymore, and going after Maria wouldn't benefit him. "You can't let this go, can you?" He shook his head. "I really can't. Even if you have no stake anymore. I always have a stake. Maybe I don't work there anymore, but I'm still a doctor, and I care about those patients. Plus, fuck Maria for firing me." I smiled a little at that. "So, you're really okay?" "Really. I'm going to find a new job somewhere else, and in the meantime, I'm going to dedicate myself to making sure Maria burns." I nodded slowly and felt a strange excitement bubble in my stomach. "So, about this whole breaking and entering thing." He finished his drink and set it down. "It's a pretty small accounting firm, maybe 50 clients in all, and Mercy is probably their biggest. I doubt they'll have state-of-the-art security." "You plan on, what, breaking in through the front?" "Pretty much." He grinned at me. "I'm going to break a window and climb in that way." My eyes went wide. "Dean, just kidding. I convinced the secretary to fax them over to the neurology department at Mercy. All you've got to do is walk inside, find the papers, and bring them out." "You're insane." "That's insane. What if someone realizes what they are?" He gave me a look. "You work in a hospital. You really think anyone's going to look at a bunch of paperwork twice?" "Fair point," I said, shaking my head. Hospitals were notoriously inefficient and outdated, and I'd seen my fair share of important-looking papers lying around randomly, and never once bothered to inspect them. He was probably right. Nobody would think to check them out, and yet it wasn't an enormous risk to take. "When is she sending them over?" "Tomorrow," he said. "Apparently she needs the day to get it all together." He shrugged and came toward me. "How much paper are we talking about?" "Financial statements from the last 3 years. Can't be that much." I rubbed my temples as he stopped right in front of me. I looked up into his eyes, and I wanted to call him crazy, wanted to push him away and storm out of here, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Truth was, I admired him. I wasn't sure I would keep pushing if I were in his position. If Maria fired me, I could imagine myself walking away and giving up. I knew this was going to be hard, that it might take some sacrifice, but I didn't picture my entire life changing so drastically because of it. The mobsters trying to intimidate me were bad enough, but losing my job at the hospital I loved the most would be going too far. And yet there he was, still scheming. I couldn't help but feel impressed. "All right, fine," I said. "But I'm never around the neuro department. You're going to have to walk me through it." He nodded and reached out to me, tentative at first, but I didn't pull away. Our last conversation flitted back into my mind, and I knew I should stop this, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to stop it last time, and I still didn't want to stop it, even if I felt like I should. He leaned down and kissed me. I kissed him back softly, without any promise of more. His fingers brushed against my hips, and I felt the power of his arms and his muscular chest. I chewed my lip, staring into his eyes. "I want this to be over, you know," he said, voice soft. "But I also want it to keep going for as long as possible, because that means you'll still be in my life. Dean, hear me out. You say you want to end things because you're afraid that I'll resent you, but that's not true. I'm betting you've spent your whole life ending things, because you believe not being able to have children is a deal-breaker for people, that someone could never love you because of it. But I'm telling you, that's not true for me. It's not even slightly true." I felt my old anger flare. "You don't know anything about me." "I think I do." He tilted his head. "Maybe not everything, but I think I'm right about this." I wanted to argue, but I clamped my jaw shut. I'd spent so long angry, fighting, arguing, trying to convince the world that I was broken and not worth its time. But maybe, for once, I could listen to what he was saying and try to believe him. It wasn't easy, but maybe I could try. "I'll get your papers," I said, slipping away from his grasp. "And then maybe we'll talk some more." He laughed and drummed his fingers on the table. "You get those papers and I'll do more than talk with you." I rolled my eyes, but smiled. "You're crazy, you know that? Anyone else would have walked away by now." "You're probably right. I guess Maria got really unlucky when I was the one that overheard her in that hallway." "I guess so." I walked to his front door, and he followed after me. "Call me tonight and explain exactly where the fax machine is, okay?" "I will." "Good. And by the way, the whole hospital is talking about you getting fired." "I'm sure they are." His face darkened. "And I'm sure the stories are all true. Actually, most people are just confused. You're pretty well liked there, all things considered." His face calmed a bit, and he laughed. "That's a huge compliment coming from you." "Damn right it is. Talk to you tonight. I should get back before Mary gets overwhelmed and tells someone I went AWOL." He nodded, and I opened the front door, then slipped out into the afternoon. I went there, expecting him to be shattered and struggling to stay afloat, and left there completely positive that if anyone was going to bring Maria down, it was going to be him. I didn't know how he kept his head up, despite being attacked, despite being fired, and I wanted to tell him how impressed I was, but couldn't quite put it into words. Instead, I was going to do my best to emulate him. I'd push forward, despite being afraid of where this all might lead, and I wouldn't turn away from something that felt good. For me, that was a win, about as big a win as it gets. 22, Dean, lied when I told her about the faxes. It was a white lie. I wasn't proud of it, but as soon as I realized what I had to do, I knew she'd insist on going with me. But breaking into an accounting firm and stealing files wasn't the same as breaking into Maria's office. It was much more likely that I'd get caught, and I couldn't risk bringing her down with me. Maybe I was spiraling. Breaking into this office was truly insane, but I couldn't help myself. Maria had gone to the next level, and now it was time to risk everything to make sure this happened. I parked in a rain-soaked lot in a corner spot away from an overhead street light. I lingered behind the wheel for a second, watching the office park through my rear view. It was true that the firm's offices were out in Doylestown, a quiet little suburb about an hour north of the city. It was past 1 in the morning, and the place was quiet. No other cars, no other people. The office park was a single story, a tangle of different companies, each with their own door, and a complicated directory was posted on every corner. The firm was called McPurdy and Donahue, and had about 6 employees as far as I could tell. The office park itself looked nice, but older, probably built in the 80s or 90s, and not updated since. I wondered how long these people had been in their offices, how many hours they logged behind the same old desks, doing the same tasks year in and year out, and I wondered how long I'd be behind my own desk, treating the same kinds of patients over and over. It wasn't a bad life, not by a long shot, but it was strange to see it from that perspective. I got out of the car and walked across the lot with my head down. I reached the door that led into the office and tried the knob, but of course it was locked. I moved around the side of the building, testing each window, until one at the far end was unlocked and slid upwards. I let out a sigh of relief. I brought a lockpick kit with me, and I watched a bunch of tutorials online about how to pick locks, but I had no clue how to actually use it. My plan was to climb in a window if I got lucky, or to pick the front door lock if I didn't, and fortunately, it wasn't going to come to that. I pushed the window all the way up, then hoisted myself up and in. I slid headfirst down on top of a desk and knocked paper, pens, an old mug, a trophy for best chili in the tri-state area, and several pictures in frames down onto a carpeted floor. I cursed and barely caught myself before I crashed down and broke my neck. The office was fairly large with some chairs against the far wall, several filing cabinets, and a desk that stretched around the corner and had multiple screens. I walked to the filing cabinet and opened it up, then rifled through with my phone flashlight illuminating the pages. I definitely had the right place. They were tax documents for a whole host of businesses, and it took me a second to recognize the filing system. I opened another drawer and found Mercy General's file, but it didn't have much in it, only some general forms from this last year. I snuck out of the office. There was a small waiting room lobby up front and to the right. I went left, ducked into another office with a similar setup, and went through those folders. This time, there was nothing on Mercy. I checked 2 more offices and came up empty before finding one last room down a flight of stairs. It was a storage space with row after row of filing cabinets, and I grinned to myself. "Leave it to accountants to keep a paper trail," I said softly to myself, opening drawer after drawer. It was slow going and took me a while, but eventually I found the Mercy files. It took up an entire drawer and then some, and I began to flip through the pages, looking for anything that would be useful. There was a lot, and it stretched back almost a decade, but I focused on the last 3 years and began to set documents aside. When I had what I hoped would be enough, I snuck back up, found the secretary's desk, and used the fax machine. I briefly wondered if the nurses on night duty would notice a bunch of financial documents coming through into the neuro department at 2 in the morning, but it didn't really matter. Stranger shit happened around Mercy. It took me another 20 minutes to fax everything, and when it was done, I did my best to put it all away. I closed the window, got the office cleaned up, then snuck out the front door, leaving it unlocked behind me. I figured they'd come back, realize it was open, and be annoyed they forgot to close up, but relieved nothing got stolen. I walked back to the car, got behind the wheel, and drove back home. Fiona showed up that night with a stack of papers under one arm and a bottle of red wine in her hand. "Well, you managed to do it," she said. I let her inside and shut the door behind her. "Told you I can be very convincing." She laughed and dropped the papers on the kitchen table, then held up the bottle. Drink? Of course. I took it from her, opened it up, and poured 2 glasses as she started paging through the documents. There's a lot of crap here, she said. I've been looking through it most of the day. Yeah? Find anything interesting? I sipped my wine and placed her glass down in front of her. A few things. She pulled a couple documents out and set them aside. But no smoking gun, not yet. We'll find it if there's anything to be found. She frowned at me. What's that mean? I've had a lot of time to sit around and think today, and I'm worried that we haven't given Maria enough credit. You think she covered her tracks? It's very possible. I'm not so sure. She sipped the wine and tapped on the stack of papers. Maria's smart, but she's also arrogant. I think she covered for herself enough to keep from getting caught if anyone gave a superficial look in her direction, but I don't think she ever anticipated what we're doing. I hope you're right. I took a pile of papers. How was the shift, by the way? Busy. She chewed on her lip absently. The rumor mill churned hard all day. Yeah? About me? Of course. Nobody has anything better to do. I laughed and drank some wine, then got to work sifting through the pages. We spent the next couple hours reading through every piece of paper in there and finished the bottle of wine. We started out at the table, but by the time we were finished, we were sprawled out on the couch and had 2 main stacks, one of all the papers that were more or less useless, and one of all the papers that might mean something. I stared at the stacks and let out a breath as I finished off the dregs of the wine. One stack was huge, the other was not. I think we're screwed, I said. She sighed and leaned her head back against the cushion. That's an understatement. How isn't there more? I don't know, I said, shaking my head. I don't even understand half this crap. What are we going to do? I don't know. I leaned toward her, and she put her head on my shoulder. I shifted my weight, sliding my arms around her, and pulled her against me. We tipped back, and she landed on my chest. I stared into her eyes, and she looked back, mildly surprised. This is why you had me come over, she said. It was your way of seducing me. Nothing more seductive than paperwork. You know exactly what a girl wants. I touched her cheek gently. If you want, we can fill out some forms together. Don't tease. I can't handle it. I moved forward and pressed my lips against her ear. I could use some help. Filing my taxes? She laughed and pushed me back, and I grinned up at her, our lips inches away, her hair spilling down around me. I ran my fingers through that hair, unable to help it, and gripped tight, pulling her down, her lips meeting mine. I kissed her hard, and she kissed me back. She tasted like wine and cherries, and I let out a soft growl as she shifted her weight, her hips pressing into mine. She was gorgeous, and I hated the way she thought about herself, and wished she could see herself the way I saw her. Smart, beautiful, strong, funny. I bit her lip and felt her breasts against my chest before shifting my weight and turning her over, pinning her back down. She looked up at me with those wide, big eyes, and I couldn't help myself. I kissed her neck, then pulled her shirt off. She let me, didn't stop it as I kissed her collarbone, her breasts, and unhooked her bra, letting it spill forward. I licked her nipples, moved back up, kissed her lips, then pulled my own shirt off. Her skin was warm and soft against mine as she moved her hips in slow, rhythmic pulses as we kissed, tongues lingering, lips moving slow, and I felt myself grow stiff, pressing up against her body. I pulled back and admired her for half a moment. Her lips, the long curve of her neck, the arch of her back, her small, firm pink nipples, and that scar. God, yes, even that scar, even if she hated it so much. I unbuttoned her jeans and tugged them off, and I could tell she was uncomfortable, probably from the way I was looking at her, and I didn't care. I kissed her belly button as my hand went down between her legs and teased her, made her hips move, a moan escape her lips. "I love every part of you," I whispered, kissing along her scar, then back up to her breasts. "I love the taste of all of you. I know you think that can't be true, but trust me, Fiona. You're beautiful." "I know you mean it," she said, then gasped as my fingers teased her faster. I pushed her panties aside and felt her slick, wet spot. "I know you mean it, but I'm afraid—" "There's always a reason to be afraid." I sank my fingers inside. "But this feels good, doesn't it? It won't forever. It can, if you let it." I bit her bottom lip and teased her again, rolling my finger along her hard little bud. She moaned, her back moving, and I pinned one of her hands above her head. "I can make you feel like this all the time if you let me. I can do things for you, my Fiona, do things to you that will make you forget everything else." Her eyes fluttered open. "Show me." I smiled and dropped down between her legs. She tasted like heaven. Her dripping, wet pussy was perfect as I lapped her up, licking her faster and faster, making her body squirm and moan, her back arch and writhe. I loved the way she reacted to every little touch, every bit of pressure, and I kept going, pushing her, making her gasp and groan, but I didn't take her all the way. I pulled back and sat down, unbuckling my belt. She crawled to me, gorgeous and lithe, her ass in the air as she helped me get my jeans off. I spanked her and teased her, and she took my cock in her hand, sliding it into her mouth. I groaned as she took me between her lips, sliding up and down, and my fingers found her wet spot, teasing her, making her moan as she sucked me. "I love watching you take me in your pretty lips," I said. "I love the way you lick me top to bottom. Goddamn, girl, I want to see your face as you slide down my cock. Tell me you want it." I grabbed her hair and pulled her back. She moaned and stared into my eyes. "I want it." "Say please." I kissed her. "Please," she whispered. I pulled her up to her feet, got her panties off, kicked away my boxer briefs, then dropped to my knees and licked her until her fingers went tight through my hair. When I stood again, I fell back onto the couch, and she straddled me, back arched, body firm and gorgeous, as she slid backwards and took me deep between her legs. She tossed her head back, and I marveled at her body, at her hips, her flat stomach, her quivering lips. I ran my fingers down her, palmed her breasts, teased her nipples, and let her ride me, her slick pussy sliding up and down, faster and faster. I gripped her ass and fucked her, taking over, taking control. She gasped, panting, and I could barely control myself. "I think about this constantly," I whispered and bit her lower lip. "I think about taking you, about making you feel good. You deserve every inch of my cock, my darling Fiona. You deserve all the pleasure you want. I want to keep you, my pet, make you squirm and beg, make you give in to every single desire you can possibly imagine, then teach you everything else you couldn't." "Yes," she moaned. "God, yes." I turned her and pinned her back down onto the couch. I took control, spread her legs wide, and we fucked slowly at first, moving together, lips locked, before I took her faster, moving in time with her moans. I followed the signals of her body, licked her nipples, fucked her faster, gripping her hips. She gasped, back arched, and I went faster, faster, feeling her slickness, her dripping wet, sweat on her skin, beating along her gorgeous pale body. I growled out my pleasure and went harder, roaring, animal-like, primal, unable to stop. I pinned her down and fucked her, took her, and when she came, her pussy clenching down, I knew I couldn't take any more. I filled her then, moaning my desire, and we came together in one glorious rush of pleasure. I gasped, kissed her, slowed down, and extended her orgasm as long as I could, her body shaking with pleasure, her fingers digging into my back. I bit her lip and smirked as her eyes fluttered open. "Fuck," she said. I laughed. "Yeah, fuck." We stayed like that for a while, maybe a minute, maybe a lifetime, before we parted and got dressed again. I took my time, watching her, still amazed at how incredible she looked, how much I still wanted her even moments after having a taste. She drove me wild, made me want even more, and I was half-hard by the time I got my pants on again. She sat back down on the couch and stared at the stacks of paper, then back up at me. "I'm not sure where this leaves us," she said. "I don't know either, but I'm not sure I care." She looked surprised. "What do you mean?" I sat next to her and pulled her against me. "Right now, I want to enjoy this. The papers, the proof, whatever, we can deal with that later." She leaned her head against my shoulder and nodded. "Yeah, okay, I can deal with that. Stay over tonight, for real this time. No more excuses." I looked down at her and kissed her. "Stay over tonight." "Okay." She chewed her lip, then smiled. "I'm starving, though." "Good. We'll order in." I kissed her again then, and hugged her close, and the papers, Maria, my job, the hospital, the mafia, everything went away for a few incredible minutes. I had her in my arms, and I'd have her all night, as much as I wanted. I could get my fill of her, although I didn't think that was possible. But this, right here, this was what I needed. This, and nothing more. 23, Fiona. I woke up in his bed the next morning, and for one crazy moment I thought I was having a panic attack, until he rolled over, looked at me with dazed, half-asleep eyes, and kissed me. "Morning," he said, and the whole night came flooding back. His lips, his arms, his body. We ate, we slept together again, we drank more wine, and we slept together again. Before finally passing out from sheer exhaustion, our bodies tangled together beneath the sheets. I'd never given myself so fully to someone, so without reservations. I couldn't think of the last time I spent hours naked in someone else's presence. He looked at me like I was a painting hanging on the wall of a museum, except I was a painting he could touch, and he was hungry for the feeling of the brush strokes beneath his fingertips. I let him look at me and reveled in it, felt a strange excitement at every glance and stare. It drove me crazy, and I felt the self-conscious confusion, all that self-loathing, slowly melt away. "Morning," I said. He sat up, stretched, and I marveled at the muscles in his back. He stood and walked into the bathroom, and I stayed there under the covers. I was still naked, really needed a shower, but I knew that as soon as I stood up, he'd stare at me with that look again, and it scared me how badly I wanted that. I wanted him to look at me like he loved me, even my flaws, all of me. When he finished brushing his teeth, he came back and kissed me. "Want breakfast?" "Coffee," I said. "You got it." He pulled on sweats and a shirt. "Want clothes?" "That'd probably be for the best. I wouldn't mind if you stayed naked." He tilted his head. "But I doubt we'd get much done today if you did." "I'm sure." I smiled and stretched, then got out of bed. I felt his eyes on me as I walked to the bathroom, so incredibly aware of every motion. But when I looked back at him, his face was absolutely adoring, and I felt that lack of confidence disappear. "I'll get started downstairs," he said. "Unless you need help in the shower?" "No, I think I'll manage." I shut the bathroom door before he could insist. I stood in front of the mirror, a stupid smile on my face, before taking a shower, using his toothbrush, and putting on a pair of sweats and an old t-shirt. Downstairs smelled like coffee and pancakes, and I smiled as he gave me a mug and gestured at the frying pan. "If you're hungry," he said, "I think I can indulge a bit." Smart move. He nodded toward the living room, and I followed his gaze. "Looks like we got a little aggressive last night." The papers were knocked onto the floor, ruining our two-pile system. I sighed dramatically. "You're such a brute," I said. "I think that was from you. Couldn't help yourself." He grinned at me, waving a black spatula in the air. "You were swept away by the pleasure of my talents." Oh, God. If you ever say that again, I swear there will never be any more pleasure happening here. Duly noted. He turned back to the stove and flipped the pancake. I wandered over to the documents and started cleaning them up. As I shuffled them together, I started to notice a strange pattern that I hadn't seen the night before. I wasn't totally sure what I was seeing, but it nagged at me as I put them back into some semblance of the order we had the night before. I tapped at my tooth with one fingernail, then pulled a couple papers from the useless pile and held them up into the air, then placed them in the important pile. I wasn't sure why, but I thought they'd provide context for certain payments that occurred on a regular monthly schedule and seemed to disappear from the underlying accounting at the end of the next month, never to be seen again. "Breakfast is ready," he said, placing a plate down at the table. He sat and sipped his coffee and dug in, and I joined him a second later, still thinking about those numbers. "Thanks for this." I sipped my coffee and let out a breath. God, I'm so addicted to this stuff. Same. I go to bed each night looking forward to drinking it the next morning. That's not ideal. I know, but I can't help it. I laughed, and we ate in silence for a couple minutes before he finished and leaned back in his chair. "Can I ask you something?" I hesitated. I knew that tone. I'd heard it 100 times. He wanted to have the conversation. He wanted to ask me about the scar, how it happened, the whole thing, and for the first time ever, I found that I didn't dread it. "Yeah, sure, go ahead." "You said you were in an accident." He spoke softly, nodding at me. "What happened?" I closed my eyes and had to ignore the knee-jerk reaction to tell him to go fuck himself. It had been a long, long time since I told anyone about what happened that night, and a large part of me never wanted to talk about it again. I'd talked about it enough over the years, with police first, then my family, then therapists, so many therapists. The therapy helped get me over that initial hump and taught me how to manage the trauma, but it didn't heal my scars. Those would always linger. I was dating this guy, an older boy named Jim. He was cute, but a total dumb jock. I sucked in a breath and opened my eyes again, and the story came pouring out. I told him the whole thing: drunk driving, accident in the field, the glass that sliced into my uterus, causing scar tissue, a total freak thing. There'd been a lot of blood, and I thought I was dying. But no, I didn't die. Only my future children, my future self as a mother. That died, and I'd never get it back. I gave him as much detail as I could stomach, talked about the way Jim tried to brace me back against the seat, the noise he made, the words he said that I couldn't remember. Then, afterward, the police, the pity, the way I shut myself off and refused to talk about it anymore. He listened quietly, paying close attention, and by the time I finished, he reached out and touched my hand, taking it and squeezing my fingers. That small gesture suddenly made it feel as if it was worth it, and I felt like a burden lifted off my chest, not entirely, but a little bit, enough to make me feel lighter. The full weight of the accident would never go away, I knew that, but losing a little bit helped. "That must have been hard," he said. "I can't even imagine." I got past it. I looked away, but didn't let go of his hand. "I can't have kids now, though. I've seen a few doctors since, and they all say the same thing. Scar tissue in the worst place imaginable, eggs will never attach, that sort of stuff." I laughed bitterly. "Maybe that's why I became a nurse." "I think I understand that," he said. "My father was abusive. He used to beat my mother so bad it'd leave her bleeding and bruised. Nobody said anything, of course, because he was careful and he was smart. But I saw what he did. I grew up watching the things he did, grew up with him turning his anger toward me sometimes. I think that's why I became a doctor, to help people, to make up for all the hurt my father inflicted." I blinked, staring at him. I knew his father was a bastard, but I didn't realize he'd been physically abusive. I should have realized, or at least I should have guessed. God, Dean, I'm so sorry. He waved it off. It's okay. I mean, it's not, but it's the past, and it made me who I am today, I guess. Never helps, hearing someone say sorry. No, but it means they care enough to say it, at least. I smiled at him and laughed. Look at us, battered and bruised. I don't think of myself that way, and I don't think you are either. He paused and pulled my hand toward him. He kissed my fingers and let them linger there. I think you're stronger because of what happened to you. Not broken, but better. You can let it destroy you, or you can take control of it. I don't know if I believe in that. What do you believe in then? I shook my head. Coming to grips with it, maybe. Accepting that it happened, but I don't think I'll ever be able to control it. He nodded. I think everyone deals with it differently. You're right about that. I laughed and chewed on my cheek for a second. This got really heavy. I know, but I'm glad it did. Yeah? You're not freaked out? Not at all. I want to know you, Fiona. I want to understand you. Do you think you understand now? I think I have more context, at least, and you do too. I nodded and let out a breath. I gently pulled my hand away, and suddenly, something clicked for me. I turned halfway back toward the stacks of documents, a frown on my face, sitting on the edge of the chair. What's wrong? He asked. I shook my head. Sorry, there's just this pattern that's bugging me. Something you said made me think about it again. He leaned back and watched me, and I stared at the papers, trying to make sense of what my brain was telling me. I'd noticed the numbers before, how they fit into this specific framework that didn't really add up for me, and it still didn't, but something was telling me an important detail was buried inside of those pages. I shook my head and turned back to him. You have a lawyer friend, right? Right. I plan on giving him all this stuff. Make sure you give him everything in that pile. I pointed to the important documents. He frowned a little. I figured. But all of it. And I think you should leave out the other pile. Are you sure? He might be able to sift through it all better than we can. I was hoping we could save him some time, though. Trust me. Give him the important pile only. The other stuff's a distraction. He opened his mouth to say something, but I saw him think better of it and nodded. Okay, then. I trust you. Thanks, I said, and let out a little laugh. I don't even know why, honestly, but I have this feeling. Well then, we have a little work to do. He pushed his chair back and stood up. Work? I thought we were done for the night. Nope. Now we get to digitize all those files. Can't risk giving him the only copies. Something might go wrong. I groaned. If I knew you were going to use me for all the grunt work, I never would have agreed to this. What can I say? You're really useful. Now, come on. These pages aren't going to scan themselves. I sighed and stood up, and together we started using an app on our phones to take a picture of each page, turn them into PDFs, and collate them. It would take all night, I knew, but as we chatted about nothing, about TV shows and movies, making stupid jokes about our lives, talking about the hospital, about the future, I realized I didn't care what we were doing. It didn't make any difference to me, whether we were scanning documents or breaking into offices. I wanted to be with him. I wanted to be near him. That was all that mattered to me. 24. Dean. Kurt looked haggard as he leaned back in the Panera booth, sipping a coffee, his laptop open in front of him. His shirt was rumpled and his tie was loosened, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. I got your email, he said. What did you think? He gestured at himself. This is what I think. Did you stay up all night or something? He sighed and rubbed his face. When I first got it, I was like, oh, this crazy shit again. Then I listened to some of the recordings of that insane woman threatening you, and I started going through the documents, and I had to go into the office. Couldn't help myself. What did you find? I felt a strange pulse of excitement. He closed the laptop and leaned toward me. Listen, man, I don't want to overstate this, okay? When it comes to the law, there's a lot of shit that can go wrong. The burden of proof tends to be pretty high in cases like this. He tapped a finger on his laptop lid. But this shit right here, this is a goddamn gold mine. I'm serious. I want to kiss you on the mouth right now. Easy there, bud. I grinned, heart racing. You're serious? I'm serious. I want to kiss you, tongue and all. Hell, you can have my baby, I don't care. I'll be your sugar daddy. He drank his coffee. Sorry, I'm exhausted and wired at the same time, and it's making me all fucked up. But really, Dean, this is incredible. I'm going to admit something. I'm not completely sure what's in those files. He barked a laugh. You're kidding me? I mean, I know it's important financial statements, but I'm a doctor. I don't speak accountant. Yeah, well, normally I wouldn't either, but turns out that a big chunk of being a lawyer involved reading really boring documents and understanding what they mean. He leaned back and stretched. You want the detailed version or the summary? Give me the summary. Basically, you have some documents in there that show the hospital taking donations from several different shell companies. The hospital then took those donations and made purchases with other shell companies that don't actually sell anything, and we know that because we've been investigating them for fucking months. I tilted my head back and laughed. It felt like triumph, even though I knew this was early days. But still, it felt like a goddamn victory after everything we'd been through. Finally, some good news. Once I calmed down, I beamed at him. What now, then? First, we make out. If you're not into that, we can move on to step 2, which is we send these documents and recordings to a very friendly Fed I know, who will then forward it on to the investigators that have been all over the Leone family for the past year and a half. Then we wait. I felt my elation slowly fizzle. You're serious? Like I said, burden of proof's real high. We can't just walk that bitch out through the hospital, even though I bet you'd love that. Kurt, man, she fired me. He gaped. No kidding? No kidding. She fired me, and now you're telling me I'm going to stay fired, probably forever? Look, I don't know. He rubbed his eyes. I can maybe speed things up, but they're going to want to wrap this all into the bigger investigation. She can't get away with this. He jabbed a finger at me. She is not getting away with it. He hesitated. She's just not getting charged in the next few weeks. Give me a timeline. Months. Probably. Oh, fuck. I'm sorry, man. And what do I do in the meantime? I can wait for all this to come out in court, then sue the system for wrongful termination, but by then, it'll have been months of being out of work. I can't have that kind of gap on my resume. This is a shit situation. I truly don't know what to tell you. I want you to tell me that we can arrest her tomorrow. I can't. I'm sorry. Fuck. I felt deflated, and all the visions of glory I had only seconds ago fizzled away. I stared at the grimy Panera tabletop and wanted to pound my fist through it. Justice was too slow. It was a grinding, bureaucratic machine, a clockwork automaton with too many moving parts and conflicting interests. It lurched along, barely getting one step forward, while the criminals and thieves sprinted along like gazelles, circling around its Hulk-like corpse and laughing. I pictured Maria sitting behind her desk, smirking at me, and I wanted to kill her. There has to be a better way, I said. I'm sorry. Unless you have proof that there's imminent danger. I leaned forward. Wait, what? Imminent danger. Threat of bodily harm. The threats you recorded weren't subtle, but she never said she was going to have you killed or anything. If you could show imminent danger, then I could get the feds to move real fast. That sort of shit always gets them going. I leaned back and let out a slow breath, then pointed to the stitched-up wound on my forehead. You see this? I was meaning to ask. You get drunk and fall off the stairs or some shit? I got jumped by 2 mafia thugs, he whistled. You're kidding me. Nope. And you're not dead. It didn't go the way they wanted, although I have a feeling they were only sent to hurt me, not kill me. Still, I've seen the sort of shit they do. They're not the kind of guys to take things halfway. This is proof, right? He hesitated. You got evidence of that? Kurt, I'm sorry, man. I'm just telling you the truth here. If you don't have evidence, and it's your word against theirs, then it won't fly. But if you've got proof, a hospital report from that night, a police report, CCTV footage, a fucking picture on your phone, anything, then I could leverage that. God damn it. I leaned my head back. I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't call the police. Then I can't do a thing for you. I sucked in a breath and let it out. There was a chance, but it felt so slim as to be non-existent. Maria was going down, but I wanted it to be sooner rather than later. I didn't want to wait, and I didn't want her to keep living her life while I was fucked and fired. There had to be a way. There was always a way. I slipped out of the booth and stood. I'll get you proof. I hope you do, he said. I hope you do it without getting hurt again. I shook his hand. Keep your phone handy. You'll be hearing from me soon. I don't doubt it. I shoved my hands into my pockets and walked off, mind reeling through a list of possibilities. None of them were good, but then again, the alternatives sucked just as much. Ultimately, though, I knew this would involve provoking another fight. I walked down the packed morning rush hour sidewalk and took out my phone. I dialed up the hospital and had them connect me to Maria's office, which rang and rang before her secretary answered and put me on hold. I wandered the sidewalk, gazed at some creeping spurge clawing its way from between a crack, admired the knotweed that grew alongside it in long twisted strands, urban grasses trying to survive in this fetid place before Maria finally picked up. "What do you want, Dr. Corse?" she asked, sounding put out. "Hello, Maria. How are you doing?" "I don't have time for this. I have a meeting in 2 minutes." "Then I'll be quick. I have proof that you've been laundering money by taking fake donations and buying fake products from fake mafia-owned shell companies, and I'm going to make sure you get burned for it." She was quiet for a few seconds. "I don't think so, Dr. Corse. I know you're desperate to save your job, but I don't think you have anything." "Try me then. I'm taking it to my lawyer tomorrow, and I'm giving you 1 day to change your mind and hire me back on staff." "Goodbye, Dr. Corse. This is pathetic even for you." She hung up, but I leaned up against a jeweler's window and smiled as I pushed the phone into my pocket. The trap was set. The bait dangled out, and all she had to do was be herself and take it. 25, Fiona. Your plan is insane. You realize that, right? Dean shrugged and spread his hands. I know, but it's the best plan I have, and it's sort of too late already. I leaned back on his couch and put my feet in his lap. It was the middle of the day, and it was my first day off in a month. It felt good, lounging around with nothing to do, and although the news of his little meeting with his lawyer friend wasn't exactly great, I still had a hard time feeling down. For the first time in forever, I felt like I'd found something I wanted to keep. I'm not sure I can be a part of it. It's probably better if you're not, but it would help. I laughed and kicked him in the stomach. He grunted and pretended like it hurt. "You're going to get killed. That's sort of the idea, minus actually dying. They're going to kill you. I hope you know that. Do you know where I can get a bulletproof vest?" "Nope, no clue." He shrugged again, actually shrugged in the face of death. "Then I guess we'll have to hope they're bad shots." I sat up straight and looked at him for a few seconds, my anger pulsing in the back of my mind. I felt like he had given me something good, something real and right, and now he was talking about taking it back. But I knew that wasn't really the case. He had a plan, and he was sticking to it, whether I liked it or not. That was Dean, and even if it annoyed the crap out of me, I had to admire it too. "All right, fine. I'll play along." "Perfect." He sucked in a breath, then let it out. So the plan is we sit around inside all day, you get naked, you let me do all the nasty things I've been imagining, and then I go and get in a fight. And you don't die. Right, I don't die. Got it. I have one problem with that plan. What's that? He frowned a little, tilting his head. I don't want to get naked. That's a huge disappointment. I stood up and stretched, getting up on my toes and arching my back. I saw the way he looked at me, letting his eyes roam down my body, and I really, really liked it. But maybe you'll get naked for me. He laughed. I'm not that easy, you know. Oh, I think you are. I leaned down and put my hands on his knees, then kissed him. I really, really think you are. I moved forward and straddled him, moving my ass down against him. We kissed for a while then, and I kept thinking about this stupid plan, about the huge risk he was taking, but I also knew why. He wanted his job back, of course, but he also wanted to protect me. I was on the chopping block next. Maria took him down, and she'd take me down sooner or later. I might be a little harder to get rid of without a good reason, since I was a member of the nurses' union in good standing, and they'd have my back if Maria tried to throw me out for clearly trumped-up bullshit. But regardless, she'd watch me like a hawk and find something to use against me, unless Dean acted now and got rid of her. I didn't love the idea of him risking his life for me, and it helped that it wasn't entirely for my sake alone. But still, I didn't want him to go out there and get hurt. The plan essentially relied on Maria making an aggressive move to stop him from dragging her down. Even though he'd already given over his proof, this was only to speed things up. If he was going to make a stupid mistake and get himself hurt, then I was going to get my fill of him first. So I kissed him, ground back down against him, and let him have his way with me, again and again, because that was what I needed, even if I was terrified that it might never happen again. He waited until after dark before he put on comfortable clothes and shoved a bunch of blank printer paper into a backpack. That doesn't look suspicious at all, I said. He shrugged and threw it over his shoulders. Doesn't have to look good. They're not going to question it. Come on, seriously? They're not stupid. He arched an eyebrow. They're thugs, Fee. Of course they're a little stupid. I sighed and rubbed my eyes. All right, fine, whatever. What's the plan again? It's easy. You follow at a distance and have your phone ready. When the assholes jump me, which I think will be pretty soon after I leave the house, you start filming. If I'm about to die, run and get help. You're crazy. He walked to me and pressed his lips against mine, kissing me slow and deep. I know I am, he said. But I want this to be done. I don't want it hanging over our heads forever. You have a life to live, and you want your job back. He smirked. That too. All right then, you'd better get out there. No more distracting yourself with me. Maybe I could use one more distraction. I didn't think you were physically capable of it. You'd be surprised what I'm capable of. I smiled and kissed his chin and wanted to beg him to stop, wanted to beg him to stay inside and pretend like none of this ever happened with me, and was almost tempted to strip down then and there to distract him from what he was about to do. Instead, he walked to the door, took a deep breath, and stepped outside without looking back. If only he'd looked back, I would have begged him to stay. Maybe that's why he didn't. I waited 30 seconds, then followed, phone clutched in my hand. He was halfway down the block by the time I stepped down the stoop, and 2 shadows were on his trail. I cursed and crossed the street, then stayed as far back as I could without being seen. He walked down several quiet streets, but the 2 men following him didn't get closer. Dean paused a few times, waiting around dead quiet buildings, but nothing happened. I felt my pulse racing, and I wanted to scream, and part of me thought they'd never make a move. Until he turned a corner and cut through an empty parking lot. One of the 2 guys jogged off to the right, skirting around the fence, while the other followed behind Dean. I crouched behind a car, my heart in my throat. but I raised my phone up as Dean nearly reached the end of the lot before stopping. It was Aldo, the short, bald one, I realized, as he stepped into the light. Dean took a few steps back and held his hands up in the air. I couldn't see a gun. The second, skinny guy named David, stood behind Dean at a distance. I wished I could hear their conversation. I saw Dean take off his backpack and drop it on the ground. Aldo said something, stepped closer, but Dean didn't move. Davide moved closer, and I knew they were going to get violent. I could feel it in the air, an electricity on the top of my tongue, like static on my arms. I tried not to scream, tried not to do anything but keep the phone steady and filming. I got it all. I got every second of it, and even moved closer, hiding behind a tree as I filmed Aldo attack Dean, and Davide hit him from behind. He fought them as hard as he could, left Aldo's nose bleeding, and Davide slumped back on the ground, but Aldo got in a cheap shot, knocked him to the pavement, and kicked him several times in the ribs. I felt tears rolling down my cheeks as Dean took the beating, curling up into a defensive posture. I heard a shout, and Aldo pulled back. A man wearing a security guard outfit jogged down the sidewalk toward them. I stopped filming, put my phone away, and ran to Dean as Aldo pulled David away, the two men escaping. I reached Dean just as the other guard appeared. The security guard was overweight, pale skin, red hair, and looked around wildly. "What the fuck was that?" he asked. "Is that guy dead?" I knelt down next to Dean. "I'm a nurse. Call an ambulance." Dean looked at me and smiled. His nose was bloody, and he had blood in his mouth. "You got it?" "Stop," I said. "Don't talk. You might have internal bleeding. Take me anywhere but Mercy." He laughed, then grimaced. I stared at the security guard, who wasn't moving. "Call a fucking ambulance, you asshole." That snapped him out of it. I did my best to make Dean comfortable with what little I had until the ambulance arrived, and after that, it was out of my hands. 26. Dean I'd gotten my ass kicked before. When I was a kid, my dad regularly hit me. Sometimes he'd go too far and he'd leave visible bruises, but he never tried to kill me, never tried to break bones. Aldo tried to break bones. Aldo wanted to murder me there in the street, and I was pretty sure he would have if not for that totally freaked-out security guard that broke up the fight. Jackson Hospital was across the city from Mercy, but Fiona convinced them to take me there. I lay on the uncomfortable bed, every breath a painful reminder that I'm a complete asshole, as Fiona paced around the room. I had to admit, the place was pretty nice, although the floors were stained a strange, sooty gray color, and the sheets were insanely scratchy. Otherwise, it was the same wood and plaster decorations as at any other urban hospital in the country. "Would you sit down?" She shook her head. "You nearly died out there." "No kidding." I grimaced, then raised my hands. "But I'm alive." "Dean, come on, sit down, you're making me nervous." She chewed on a piece of hair, then sighed, frustrated, and sat down in the red-upholstered plastic chair. She leaned back, crossed her legs and arms, and glared at me. "This sucks," she said. "This really sucks." "It's not that bad," I said. "I had to watch you almost get killed, you realize that, right? We just found each other and you're getting yourself killed." I raised an eyebrow at her, and her face turned red as she realized what she said. But I decided not to push her on it. She could only take so much before she tried to kill me herself. "I know that was hard," I said softly, because talking too loud hurt. I had several broken ribs and some very minor internal bleeding, but the doctors didn't think I'd need surgery, which was a miracle. My knees hurt, my arms hurt, and my fists were smashed open. But I was alive, and I would heal, probably without any lasting damage. All in all, the plan went perfectly. "It was really hard, but we did it. You got the video, right?" "I got the video. Send it to me and I'll email it to Kurt." I leaned over, grabbed my phone from the side table with a grunt of pain, and held it up. She narrowed her eyes. Right now? Right now. It had been a few hours since the fight, and I wanted to get out ahead of this as fast as we could. Maria would know about what happened, and she probably thought that would be enough to keep me off her back for a while. I wanted to surprise her. Fiona typed on her phone and sent the video through. I saved it, then emailed it to Kurt, along with a short note. Take a look at this. I bet your Fed pals will recognize those two guys. I'm currently at Jackson Hospital, but I'm okay. Get to work. She watched me the whole time, and even though she was showing anger, I knew she was worried. I shouldn't have put her through that, but then again, I was the one that got my ass kicked. I reached out and took her hand, and for a second, I thought she might pull away, but then she leaned forward and kissed me. I kissed her back, slightly surprised that she was willing to do this in semi-public, but not questioning it. A man cleared his throat. Fiona pulled back, blushing. My doctor stood in the doorway, a man named Dr. Heckler that I'd met once or twice at conferences, a nice enough guy. Dr. Corse, how are you feeling? Better now, thanks. He smiled a bit, looking over his glasses at my chart. Looks like your imaging came back good. I'll have someone else take a look to double-check, make sure there won't be any surprises, but you seem to be in pretty good shape for a guy that got jumped. Thanks, I try. I'm curious, why didn't you go to Mercy? I think that was closer, but the ambulance guys said you wanted to come here. I'm too well known at Mercy, I said, grinning. Plus, they canned my ass, so fuck them. He raised his eyebrows, glanced at Fiona, then back at me. I realized he must figure it was because of her that I got fired, but whatever, let them gossip. I was done with that, done with the whole damn thing. I'd taken enough abuse. It was time to finish this. Well then, you'll stay overnight, and in the morning we'll see how you're feeling. Sound good? I'll tell you right now, I'm going to feel awful in the morning, but I'm going home. He smiled. I bet you are. Have a good night. I'll check on you later. He nodded to Fiona, then left. That guy's going to tell everyone in here that you got fired because you're banging me, she said. I laughed, then groaned. Don't be funny, not right now. It's worth it, though, she said, leaning toward me. What is? Banging me. I grinned, kissed her, and nodded. God damn right it is. She kissed me again, deeper this time, and I briefly wondered if she could fit in the bed with me, and maybe I could try a little something. But my phone started ringing, and Kurt's name showed up on the screen. Hey, buddy, I said. Holy shit, are you okay? I'm alive. I watched that video. Dude, where did you learn to fight like that? I smiled and closed my eyes. Long story. But what do you think? Looks like imminent danger to me. He paused for a long moment. You didn't instigate that, did you? I might have warned Maria that I had the goods on her. He sighed loudly. I wish you hadn't done that. Sorry, bud. I know it'll make things a little harder, but I needed this. I couldn't wait. Yeah. Well, look, even I recognize that little bald fucker. He's a real sick one, did you know that? Aldo? I don't know his last name. He's a suspect on more than a few murder cases. And now you'll get him for assault. Among other things, I'll forward that video along. Expect to hear from the investigators tomorrow. I can't wait. Get some rest, bud. Looks like you need it. See you. He hung up, and I tossed the phone back onto the table. Fiona shifted and held my hand. Well, we're all set? He thinks that'll be more than enough to get the feds to move fast. She let out a relieved laugh, then kissed me. You're crazy, you know that? I know it. Nobody does this sort of stuff. What can I say? When there's injustice, I have to act. She kissed me again, and this time we lingered there before she pulled back, her eyes on mine. I thought there might be something she wanted to say, but instead she pulled up a second chair and put her feet up on it before turning on the hospital TV. Let's watch a movie, she said, Make a night of it. Oh, great. Yeah, I'd love to. We'll call it a date. Fitting, since we're in a hospital. I smiled. Think they're hiring? I thought you'd come back to Mercy once Maria was gone. I don't know. This place is nice. And besides, do you really want to work in the same place as me? She opened her mouth, about to speak, then shut it again. Let's find a movie, she said, and flipped through the channels. I watched her more than I watched the screen, her long auburn hair, her full pink lips, and I knew without a doubt in my mind, that I was going to marry that girl. One way or the other, she'd be all mine. 27, Fiona. 1 week after Dean was released from the hospital, his lawyer friend, Kurt, called him early in the morning. I answered Dean's phone because he was trying to sleep in for once, and I had a shift at the hospital. It's nice to hear from the infamous Fiona, he said, laughing. Infamous? I'm not sure how I feel about that. Infamous in my circle, at least, and with the feds. That's probably not a good thing. No, it's definitely good. How's our boy doing? Trying to sleep in, which is why I answered. When I saw your name pop up on his screen, I figured it was important. You might want to wake him up. He sounded delighted, and I got a weird little itch in my spine. Something big's about to happen. How big, exactly? Legally, I can't say, you know what I mean? But if you show up at Mercy this morning, say around 9, you'll see something very interesting. Will it involve a lot of cars with flashing lights? He sounded like he was smiling. It just might. See you then? See you then. I hung up and slipped back into the room. Dean was awake and sitting up on one elbow. He was shirtless, and the bruises still covered his chest and ribs, black and yellow and nasty. His nose was swollen, and bruises lingered under his eyes. I'd been taking care of him since he was released, and I could tell that was starting to get on his nerves. He liked some of my attention, but he didn't like feeling like a patient. Who was that? He asked. Kurt. Sorry, I should have let you get it, but I wanted you to sleep in. No, that's fine. I'm glad you answered. I might have ignored it. I grinned at him and tossed the phone onto the bed. Good thing you're awake, because we're taking a little trip. Oh, yeah? Something's happening at the hospital, and Kurt says you're going to want to see it. I checked the time, a little past 6. I have to be there at 8, but meet me in the lobby a little before 9? I can do that. He stretched and grimaced. Goddamn girl, don't ever let me get my ass kicked by mafia thugs again. I promise. I knelt down on the bed and kissed him. He grabbed me and pulled me on top of him, and I was careful not to press down on his bruises. He kissed me longer, hands on my hips, and I wiggled my back a little. I wanted to stay there, stay in bed with him like we'd been doing every night, and every morning when possible, but I had to be at work soon. Even half-broken, the man was ravenous for me, and I could only guess what my future held once he fully healed. It was strange, living in his place. At first I thought it would be weird, but I quickly got used to it, and then I fell in love with it. I loved going to sleep with him, waking up with him, letting him joke with me, laugh with me, kiss me when he wanted, touch me where he wanted. It was like a new dream every morning and every night, and I never wanted to wake up from it. I squirmed off him, and he groaned. No fair. Why don't you quit your job and stay in bed with me? Because one of us has to earn some money. Please, I've got savings. I was a single man working as a doctor. I bet you do, but I'm not looking for a sugar daddy. How about a baby daddy? He grinned at me. I'd be happy to knock you up. Weirdo. I walked to the bedroom door. Sleep in a little more. I'll see you at like 8:50 down in lobby, okay? Sounds good. I blew him a kiss, and he winked as I slipped out of the room and padded down the hall. As I made coffee and had a light breakfast, I marveled at how comfortable this all felt, and knew that eventually it would have to end. Not our relationship exactly. He hadn't said he ever wanted me to leave, although I hadn't asked yet, But this in-between period, this interregnum, whatever it is we were doing, I knew we'd have to talk about what we were to each other if we were going to keep on with this thing, although I didn't want to. I wanted to revel in what we had and not think about anything else, but I knew that wasn't how the world worked. The morning was crisp and clear as I walked to work. He lived closer to Mercy than I did, which was another perk of staying with him. I arrived a little early, dropped my things off, then got settled behind the nurse's station as the night shift headed home, looking exhausted, smelling like bleach and blood. Mary joined me a few minutes later, sporting an enormous coffee in a thermos. She sat with a sigh and gave me a little nod. "Morning, darling. How's your boy?" "Alive and kicking." "Lucky you." She winked and got up to check on a patient. The hospital knew about my relationship with Dean. It was hard to keep it a secret, and honestly, I didn't care if they talked. Mary was surprisingly okay with it, and actually encouraged me to keep it up. I hadn't expected that. She talked a big game about how handsome the doctors were and all that, but she seemed pretty adamant about never settling for one. Maybe I changed her mind. I watched the clock, feeling nervous and excited, and headed down to the lobby at exactly 10 to 9. I found Dean already there, sitting in an overstuffed chair with coffee in his hand, wearing a pair of jeans and a gray button-down. "It feels weird being here as a civilian," he said, and kissed my cheek. "I know, right? Nobody's stopped by to say hello. It's like I'm dead. And you're a ghost, haunting me. You love it. You can call me Casper the fucking Ghost." "Gross." He laughed and stood, then hugged me against him. I pulled away, looking up into his face when someone barked his name. I turned to see a good-looking guy, square jaw, blonde hair, and blue eyes, come striding toward us, wearing a dark black coat and carrying a briefcase. Everything about him screamed, "Lawyer." "Kurt," Dean said, "I hear you convinced Fiona here to drag me into this godforsaken hellhole. And you're going to be happy that I did." They shook hands, and Kurt stood next to him, arms crossed, briefcase dangling. "I don't have much time, but I came for the show." "What's going on exactly?" Dean asked. Kurt nodded toward the door. "Watch this shit." As if on cue, 8 men came storming in through the doors. They were a mix of federal agents in suits and ties, Philly detectives and uniformed officers. They strode through the room like they owned the place, ignored the elevator, and started to climb up the steps. "Okay," Dean said. "That was exciting, but what's it all about? I came through for you, my man. Explain to me, in detail, what that means." Kurt laughed. "Last night, 2 mafioso motherfuckers were arrested. They go by Aldo and Davide. I believe you're very well acquainted with them." Dean grinned. "No kidding." "No kidding. They're rotting in a cell right now, and they're going down. Big fucking time. I checked out the case they're building, and it's solid." "Good news," he said. "But what about this?" "This is about your girl. Just watch and enjoy, man." Dean looked at me, and I shrugged. I knew about as much as he did. We lingered, waiting, and minutes slipped past, when finally the elevator doors opened again, and the crowd walked back the opposite way, but slower this time. And at their head was Maria, with her hands behind her back and cuffs around her wrists. I laughed. I couldn't help myself. Dean joined in after a second, and Maria looked right at us, her eyes empty and distant. But I saw a spark of recognition there, a little glint of anger. She might not have been sure how she got caught before, but she sure as hell knew now. Kurt grinned at us, then held up a hand. "You're welcome. Now, I'm going to go talk to those fine gentlemen, if you'll excuse me." He stepped toward the crowd. "Kurt, thanks," Dean said. "I mean it. I owe you one." Kurt shrugged. "Sure you do, but, man, I sure hope I never have to call that favor in." He grinned, waved, and fell into step with a tall Fed bringing up the rear. Marie was let out in cuffs, and for one beautiful moment, the hospital was dead silent. Then conversation resumed. I knew the rumor mill would be going wild for the rest of the day, and I was one of the only people in the whole place that knew why she'd been arrested. Dean put an arm around my shoulders. "Feels good, doesn't it?" I nodded and leaned my head against his chest. "I didn't think we'd see this." I wasn't sure myself. I laughed and kissed his cheek, getting up on my toes to reach it. "You sure acted like you did." I kept it together, played it cool. What a guy. He kissed my hair. "Now she's gone. So what do we do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm guessing there will be trials. We'll have to testify and all that. Then we live our life." "That's right. We live our life." He hesitated and pulled away from me. I looked at him as he tilted his head and stared into my eyes. "I want you to stay," he said. "Stay?" I felt a flutter in my chest. "With me, at the apartment. You can keep your place if you want, but stay with me." "You're asking me to move in?" "I guess so." "It's a little fast, you know." "I know, but I don't want you to leave." I laughed and shook my head. 2 weeks ago I could barely bring myself to kiss you, and now you can't get enough. It's crazy, right? No, it's not. He pulled me against him again. "I love you, Fiona. I knew it the second I saw you that day." I felt it then, the thing that had been growing for days, for weeks. It was like a balloon, blown to bursting, and it finally broke open. I blinked back tears and hugged him tight. "I love you too. So then you'll stay?" "Yeah, I'll stay." "Good." He tilted my chin up and kissed me, and we held that pose for a long moment, until someone said Dean's name. It took me a second to register that someone spoke to him. I was so deep inside my own head, so head over heels in the moment, that the world around us had gone away. But Dean pulled away from me and turned, and I felt him tense. I looked over, and a man stood a few feet away, gray hair, nice smile, deep tan skin. "Dr. Chen." Dean sounded surprised. "I didn't expect you. My employers thought we should talk." He gestured toward some chairs nearby in a small corner of the lobby. "Do you mind, just for a moment?" "Fiona stays with me," Dean said. "Whatever you say can be for her, too." "Ah, but I wouldn't want her to leave. This affects her as well." His smile was strange and somewhat aggressive. Dean walked to a chair and sat. I lowered myself down next to him, and Dr. Chen took the seat opposite. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" Dean asked. "I've been sent to deliver a message and to offer a deal." Dean frowned and gestured. "Go on." "The message is this. Vincent Leone is very unhappy about what you've done here. Do you know who that is, Dr. Corse?" "I don't," Dean said. "Vincent Leone is the head of the Leone family. They're my primary employers, though I sometimes freelance elsewhere." He smiled again and ran a hand through his hair. I realized he was nervous, though I didn't know why. He held all the power here. I wouldn't want him to be unhappy with me then. "No, you wouldn't. But there's a deal he's willing to make." "I'm listening." Dr. Chen glanced away, like he wanted to make sure nobody was listening, before he leaned closer. "Vincent's been dealing with a health issue that I believe you can help with." Dean frowned slightly. "Health issue?" "I haven't been able to confirm it, but I believe it might be multiple sclerosis." Dean let out a huff of air and glanced at me. MS was a serious disease, but it wasn't necessarily a debilitating death sentence, especially when caught early. There were treatments, though they had varying degrees of success. MS remained a frustratingly individual disease. "That's something I have experience with," Dean said, keeping his expression neutral. "The deal is this. If you agree to take on Vincent as a patient and to treat him as discreetly as humanly possible, then they're willing to overlook everything here." "And if I don't?" Dr. Chen shook his head. "There's no alternative here. I'm calling in my favor for this, and you're helping Vincent." Dean was quiet for a moment, staring at Dr. Chen with an intense expression before cocking his head. "And why do you care so much?" "Because I've been helping Vincent for a long time, and now he's dealing with something outside of my comfort zone. I want you to handle him from here on out." Dean nodded once. "Okay then, I'll do it." "Dean," I said. He put a hand on my leg. "I'm sorry, Fiona. There's no other way. We can't stay involved with these people. Once they're in—" "One patient," Dean said, looking at Dr. Chen. "Vincent only. Nobody else. That's all we ask. Then I'll take him on. But I don't have a hospital at the moment." Dr. Chen stood. "Oh, I wouldn't worry about that. I have a feeling Mercy will be hiring you back very shortly." He turned and walked off without another word. I watched him go, a stone in my gut. "I don't like this." "I don't either." He took my hand and kissed my fingers. "But this is over now. I'm serious, it's over. I'd treat Vincent even if it didn't get the mafia off our backs because he's a person and it's what I do. So don't worry, we're going to be okay." I wanted to be angry, to fight and push back, but that was the old me still raging inside. I needed to be better. It was time to change. "I trust you," I said. He kissed me. "And I love you. And I love you too." He grinned and stood. I stood with him, leaning against his strong body. Even beat up and half-healed, he was one hell of a man. "You'd better get back," he said. "Mary can't hold down the fort forever." "I'll see you after my shift?" "You better." He watched me walk off, and I loved the feeling of his eyes on my body. Maybe it wasn't perfect. Maybe it was a compromise to take Vincent on as a patient, but it was the right decision. And now it meant that he'd come back to the hospital, he'd work with me, and we'd live together. For a moment, that scared me, until I thought about what it meant. Waking with him in the morning, his fingertips brushing down my spine, his lips against my neck, his hand in mine on the couch, his laughter in the kitchen. Every day, all day, my Dean. If that was a compromise, it was one I was willing to make again, and again, and again. 28. Fiona, 2 years later. Mercy General's lobby was filled with patients as I walked through it, a coffee in each hand. I nodded to the receptionists behind the desk, older volunteers that helped guide folks to wherever they needed to go. The hospital was the labyrinth of twisting passages and locked doors, and even though I'd been working there for years, I still got lost sometimes. I rode the elevator up, humming to myself, and got off on the 4th floor. The carpet made my footsteps silent as I walked past rows of closed doors, small plates covered in names and credentials. I stopped outside of one, knocked softly, then pushed it open. Dean turned from his desk and smiled at me. "Morning. I was beginning to think you got lost." I handed him one of the coffees. Our fingers brushed together as he took it, and his eyes fell onto the rings I wore. I smiled a little and held my hand out. One big diamond glittered at him. "What do you think?" "It suits you. I don't know. It's a little obnoxious. My new husband— oh, I like that word." He grabbed me and pulled me into his lap. I laughed and kissed him. "Do you?" "Say it again, baby." "Husband," I whispered. He laughed and kissed me, but I stayed in his lap. "Thanks for the coffee. Although you didn't have to wait at Starbucks, I'm not fancy." "You might not be, but I am." He grinned. "Fair enough. Who are you working with today, by the way?" "Young girl named Jenny. She seems nice." "You say that like you're old." "I'm an old pro at this point." He snorted and kissed me, and I finally got out of his lap. I leaned up against the door and watched him sip his drink and smile a little the way he always did after the first sip of the day. "I might be a little late today," he said, not looking up. "I have that special patient at the end of my shift." I let out a breath. I knew what that meant. Vincent Leone was making a trip over to Mercy. His Highness himself, The man Dean had to roll out the red carpet for, pull all kinds of strings, call in all kinds of favors, all so everything could be done off the books. It was obnoxious, but it was the price he paid for our safety. "I'll wait if you want." "Nah, go home. Enjoy a little time alone in the new place." I smiled and glanced up at the ceiling. We moved into a house not far from Mercy 3 weeks ago and got married a week later. After the wedding, which was small and tasteful and obscenely expensive because Dean wouldn't settle for anything less than perfect, we went on a honeymoon traveling through Europe, and now we were settling into our life together. The thought of the empty house sent a strange pang through me. I'd been feeling it off and on for a while now, for the past year, really, as we settled into our life together. We talked about our family sometimes, but I still couldn't have babies, and that would never change. And yet the idea of always having an empty house filled me with something like dread, and I wanted to change that. "I think we should adopt." The words spilled out in a tumble. He blinked at me, clearly taken off guard. "Sorry, I know this is random, but I've been thinking a lot about it." "Okay." He leaned back in his chair. "Let's start the process tonight." "Really?" I felt a laugh bubble up and burst from my lips. "You're okay with that?" "Of course I am. I want a family with you, and adoption's the best option. We could do a surrogate." He waved a hand. "There are babies that need a family out there right now. Let's adopt." I chewed on my lip before walking over and kissing him again. I lingered there, tasting the coffee, his toothpaste, him, and I kept thinking, this was right. This what perfect. I never expected something like this. Never thought I'd be with a man like him, so willing to compromise, to wake up early to cook me breakfast, insatiable in bed, protective and incredible. I wanted more of him, and sometimes I felt greedy, but I couldn't help myself. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I'm positive. I've been waiting for you to bring it up, honestly. I didn't want to mention it too soon." "I'm ready. The house is perfect. We can start setting up the nursery this weekend. We'll go buy more baby stuff than we'll ever need." "Perfect." I kissed him again. I really should get going. "Tonight, after my special patient, we'll start looking into adoption. Promise?" "Promise." I nodded and walked to the door. I looked back at him, at his neat office, at his handsome face and muscular arms, and I felt lucky, blessed, really. "I love you," I said. "I love you too." I turned and left, walking down the quiet hall and took the stairs down. I went to my station, sat down, and got to work. And all day I thought about our future. A baby, our little family. We'd have this future together, the future I never thought was possible for me. But because of him, I was less angry all the time. I didn't hate the world as much as I used to, and seeing the scar in the mirror didn't send me down a shame spiral that took hours to crawl out of. Now, I felt beautiful, because he treated me like I was. I couldn't have asked for more. I never dreamed of having half so much. "Fiona, are you okay?" Jenny frowned at me a little. "You keep smiling." "Sorry," I said, shaking my head. "Thinking about the honeymoon." She grinned. "Lucky you. Tell me all about it." "Sit down. I got some stories you'll love." She sat, leaned back, and we started chatting.